Hey guys, I think we are live now. Coming at you from Ontario.png, we have Night Danger with us, along with Gelatinous Rube and Aries Chronicles. If you guys want to go around and introduce yourselves, I think people probably know who I am. If not, then I don't know.
How did they
Uh,
find this?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I assume it's on my channel, so
yeah. Um, Night Danger, Canadian midwit. Yeah.
beautiful. And Gelatinous Rube.
Hi, I'm Gelatinous Rube. I'm a third-party designer for it was previously mostly fifth edition and into Pathfinder second edition, maybe some stuff for AD&D and Pathfinder second edition as well.
And Aries.
Hello, I have been making high fantasy role-playing supplements for Dungeons and Dragons for a few years and branching out into science fiction with our new game Titans of Fallen Earth, which is Kaiju versus Mecha. So check me out on Twitter at Iris Chronicles.
And we are here to talk about one-shots today because there was this huge discussion kicked off by I think it was originally a Reddit post. And I guess we could read it, but I think most people have already read it. The gist of it was some girl came into a group, auditioned to be a dungeon master with them. And I know we have feelings about that. She auditioned to be a dungeon master with them by spending 18 hours designing this one shot. They played in the one shot, they liked it. She came into their group and they played like one game and then canceled 15 minutes before session 2 because like one guy in their group didn't like her or something, and it sparked like a ton of conversation. This post went completely viral. A lot of people think it was like one of those Reddit stories that people made up for engagement, and maybe it was, but 18 hours for a one shot. I don't know. Do you guys have any feelings about that?
Well, I don't really understand why the conversation veered towards the amount of prep that she had taken and veered away from the guys being like complete creeper assholes. Like that was weird to me. I'm like, who gives a shit how much prep she did? Like these guys were assholes.
Because
Yeah.
if
But
you
anyway,
spend
yeah.
18 hours, I mean, listen,
Yeah.
to be fair, if you spend 18 hours doing something and you might just have it thrown all away by somebody who's being a creeper asshole, a pretty important conversation or consideration for people to make when they start prepping.
Absolutely. And I don't mean to turn the conversation away from the guy being an asshole to her and kicking her out of the group, because
He'll get
that was pretty
his.
shitty. Like, I can't imagine. But still, kind of the conversation did kind of veer towards the fact that you were auditioning a DM. I don't know. That seems strange.
Well, it's I think it's a natural extension of the play culture of fifth edition and its attendant associates. If you look at there's a very common, you'll see people complain about their experience running fifth ed, which is that they feel like they're entertaining, that they're performing for their players, they're spinning all these plates, they're handling basically everything. All the cognitive load sits on the GM to dance like a monkey for the players, and so in that sense, the idea of like paid DMs or auditioning DMs, uh, it it checks out because at that point it's a gig. It's like like those people who dress as superheroes and go to birthday parties for kids. Like
Whew.
it's a performance racket. Um,
I think that's a pretty good point, actually. Because
uh,
and I'll admit I've done paid DMing. I actually currently run at least one paid game, and sometimes playing with randos does have that. You know, you don't know what you're gonna get, and I do play with randos. I have my friend group and I have my rando group, but the randos, they can be tough. Now that said, I do think she had the right idea by opening it up with a one shot. That's what I always do. Whenever I am kind of getting a new group. Invite people to a short campaign, a 1, 2, 3 shot maybe, and then I invite like the cream of the crop to like the long games. That's how I do my stuff. But I
Harmony,
know that
you're
probably doesn't. Yeah, go ahead.
you're roboting.
Oh no. All right, someone else talk.
The entire stream is freezing up.
Oh god.
Uh,
Is that a thing?
I haven't noticed.
Oh
I
no.
also haven't noticed. I'm not listening to it at the same time, though.
I would
Well,
say
it may be on your end then, Greg.
this could be what is known as an issue.
I can no longer understand anyone. The stream is frozen.
Oh dear.
Oh,
Okay.
so he's
Well, it
roboting
sounds
on
like we're
his
still
end.
good. I hope your
All right.
internet fixes itself.
I I hate to say it there, brother, but this is unfortunately seems like it's on your end. Um,
Sad.
And to disconnect and reconnect. Something I would mention about the concept of auditioning for a DM is I think that's totally fine. Honestly, I can't imagine that being a problem for most people. The idea is, hey, we're going to be spending a lot of time with somebody for uh, presumably months on end, possibly even years. I want to see how you run. I want you to see how we play. When I've had people run as a GM in my campaigns and I'm getting ready to repeat this process with Lancer, they're going to have a test session, right? Where it's only one session that they're sort of in charge of and handling. So I don't really see that as being an issue. But again, mostly because I treat players the same way, have them in for an audition session. I think with Chilmus Valley, I was having people. We got to a point, I think, about a year in where I would exclusively have people play a dungeon crawl for their first session, just so we could see, all right, can you handle making attack rolls? Can you handle running through a dungeon? Can you handle the basics of the game and the basics of teamwork and social interaction with the rest of the players? And if they could, then they could graduate to the game. I've also
Right.
demoted players back down to that kind of dungeon crawling in the past.
Audition
Perhaps-
seems like a. Go on.
I think
Perhaps
it's
it was me
maybe
all
the
along.
terminology. Maybe the terminology of audition is what's throwing me off here, because I suppose I've done the same thing. Like I run exclusively, really in the flesh with the same group of guys. But a couple of years ago, we had a guy. One of my players said, "Hey, I've got this coworker. He'd like to come check it out," and we brought him out just for 2 or 3 sessions, just to kind of feel things out, see how he meshed with the overall with the overall social fabric that we've got going at the table, and it was a very bad fit. But it was I guess I don't quite understand or connect with the idea of filtering or selecting based on system mastery or proficiency, especially for new people, because I see that as something that just can be taught.
Yeah.
Now, if it's based on this post, it seems like it's an established group that's looking for a new GM. I feel like the most reliable way to have a GM who has good social connection with the group and reasonable mastery of the system would be to choose a GM from your own ranks at the table, instead of trying to pull someone from the ether and patch them in what is arguably the most labor intensive spot at the table, especially for a newer system.
That's what I didn't get. I was one of the probably hundreds of people that read that story and saw the guy Jason that bullied this girl out and said, "Well, why didn't Jason DM? Seats open. He should put up." But
This
Well,
assumes, of course, that it happened. But
Of course.
sure.
assuming that it's happened, it would boil down to most people are lazy. They do not want to do. They don't want to engage at a high effort level with something that is seen as a leisure activity. And I think this is worth. I've been thinking about this a little bit the last couple of weeks, is the delineation between something that you do for leisure and something you do as a hobby, which is something that is low mental engagement, low effort, that you do to relax, and something that you cultivate as a skill. Or it's like there's obviously a difference between watching movies and painting model trains. There's obviously like they're both something that people do in their free time for enjoyment, but they are not the same category of activity. Does that?
Yes. I
And
think I see
I
what
think
you're
that a lot
saying.
of people engage with RPGs like watching a movie or television, and not like painting model trains.
Mhm.
I think that's about right. And we have a super chat, so I've got to read it here. Thank you, Tag. Oh no, I know it's going to be a good one because it's Tag. One shots are for women's divisions and casuals. Go play real D&D. Can't stay, have a good stream. Thank you, Tag. You have a special thanks from the women's division. But I think that they have a point, and I'm actually not against the audition concept. If you don't have a DM from your group, or if you don't have anyone that's willing to DM from your group, I think you hit on something earlier that's fine. I mean, I don't have a problem with the auditioning of a GM, or honestly, this could be seen from the separate viewpoint that Willow, the girl in the story, was auditioning players. I think that's another way to look at it. And I think it's valid. I mean, you'd hate to go into a campaign and then find out there's a bad match, not the same style, group breaks apart, whatever. I mean, the group broke apart anyway. So I don't know about the validity of that point. But before we move on, Aries, Rube, you have anything to add, either of you, to that?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I'd be curious to know who was rejected because the article does mention that they tried two before Willow and those didn't work out. I'd be interested to know why they didn't work out. But Willow is implied to be a very skilled DM, or at least they think she is. And she apparently is because she ran it and they liked it and they just didn't keep her for the second session or something like that. So if she is a pretty experienced DM, now I don't think 18 hours is sufficient for a one shot at all. Well, I mean, it's more than sufficient. I think one shots
You
should,
confused me there for a
yeah,
second.
more than sufficient. I think one shots should actually be less structured. Um, but if she does have a lot of experience as a DM, why did why didn't she use like some of the other things that she's done in the past for them? You know, surely she's got like folders and folders of one shots and things that she's ran successfully for other groups. Maybe she could have just tried one of those. I wouldn't have seen prep to be necessary at all in that case if you're really an experienced GM.
I can conceive of a circumstance where somebody spends 18 hours preparing for a one shot. However, that circumstance is one of two things, or both of them. The first is if it is someone who it's like their very first time GMing. I can see it taking a lot longer to prepare anything because you're not familiar with the rule books. You're learning the procedures. Uh, you're familiarizing yourself with like monster manual entries and like all of that, and you have no legwork, pre-existing legwork that you can fall back on. Like you don't have any existing muscle memory of like I know how to run a goblin encounter. I've done 30,000 of those. So I can see it in a experience in an inexperienced GM. I can see 18 hours happening for your first session ever. Just because like it's nerve wracking, it's intimidating, and you want to make sure you do a good job, and so you might go a little overboard, and it's not a big deal. The other side of that is prepping. There are certain elements of session prep that are actually just quite enjoyable in and of themselves, especially if you're the type of person who likes to make NPCs, likes to draw maps, likes to do these sorts of things. You can lose track of time and you can find yourself crafting all of this very highly detailed stuff, and that can produce a that can be useful or not useful. Like it's kind of a gamble on whether or not any of the prepped material will be relevant. But so I can see how 18 hours could happen. I just wouldn't do it personally. Um, Not for a one shot, anyhow. I absolutely could see 18 hours or more of prep going into the preamble before launching a new campaign from scratch, like something that you intend to last.
Which is the one thing that stuck out to me in the post is I think you're right. I think that she was developing, I think it stated explicitly in the post that she was developing a world, sort of with the expectation that this was going to continue on.
Yeah, if it's an
So,
audition one shot, then the world would presumably be continued to use, like
right.
continued. And I really agree with Alexander Macris on this, in that before you launch a new campaign, that's when like most of the really heavy prep happens. That's when you're looking at maps. That's when you're, if you have the types of players that I have, you're looking at demographics and taxable peasantry and markets and all that annoying fiddly stuff, and you can totally find yourself putting in a lot, like a lot of time before the campaign starts. But yeah, I don't know. I could go on about this, but I should leave breathing room for other people in the.
It's an interesting story, and we don't know whether or not it was real, because it was on Reddit. Who knows? Nothing on the internet's real until proven. But it ignited a firestorm of comments, though. Like everybody had an opinion on it, and I think most people, the opinion was F Jason. But anyway, to get beyond that, I kind of want to like share personal stories at this point. Like, do you guys run one shots semi frequently or ever? And do you guys have any that you like kind of want to share? I don't know. Maybe that's a little bit on the spot, but I definitely I have one. I don't run many one shots, but my first time DMing, I ran a one shot. Um, I think most people did though.
Very rarely. I normally don't do
Okay.
any kind of one shots. I really like long standing West Marches, or at this point
Mhm.
Grand Campaign or Bronzing style campaigns. Basically as much time as I can get with as many people as I can get, especially running online. You could just have like 200 people both are in about 2 years. And so that's fun to me, you know. But I did run a one shot for I did again. It was Lancer actually for my home group back in South Jersey. It was between campaigns. I said, "Hey, let me just run a one shot. Let me just run a one shot of like a system other than fifth edition. Let's see how this goes." And it was entertaining. There wasn't a lot of prep. There was I used pre-generated characters, which is a lot easier to do in a game like Lancer because at the first basically a starting character is going to have mostly identical features, or I shouldn't say mostly identical features. A lot of your major features are going to be identical to your fellow players because you're all playing the same version of mech, the GMS Everest. So it was pretty easy for the new players or for my players at that point to pick up my home group. They got everything pretty quickly. We had to occasionally stop for a few rules questions and stuff like that. But it was, I don't know, it was fun. I get why people do it. There's a lot of like, especially for you doing it to create like a new system or to introduce people to a new system, you're going to run into like all these little creative bits. People a lot of times just feel a little bit more free to engage with the rest of the game, you know? In a one shot, it's like a little more consequence free, so they're a little bit more likely to experiment. And if you want to get your group, I don't know, if you want to get your group in that kind of creative play space, then that's a good way to do it. Besides that, I don't.
I'm kind of the same. I feel that if it's a small group and this is a one shot, so this is divorced from the permanency of a world, then I want to let the players do whatever they want in it. I want to let them destroy that world. If it's divorced from the permanency of it, then I want to be able to let them do whatever they want with it. in like the 4 hours, the 6 hours, however long the one shot is. I really want the players to be able to do whatever they want to just pull apart the world at the seams. So I think that's actually a really good point. I guess I'll tell about mine because the first game I ever ran was a complete one shot. And I probably put as much work as Willow did from the story. I probably put 18 hours of work into that one shot. This was back when I was a baby at DMing, and it was the first thing I ever ran. I had to be perfect. I put probably 18 to 20 hours of prep into it. It was a dungeon, but it was based on the Chinese zodiac, and every room had like an encounter that had to do with a different animal from the zodiac, right? And I even like creeped on my players, and I looked up their birthdays, and I was like, this encounter is going to like target that player somehow, right? Based on the year they were born, because it was the Chinese zodiac. It was kind of silly. And I don't know if I'd run anything like that now because it was a complete railroad. They had like no choice except at the end. But it was like my intro to DMing. And I still like people still who are in that one shot were like, yeah, that was really fun. And I'm like, are you just being nice to me? Was that really fun? But I don't know. It was
A well
that
executed
was
one shot with
several
your
years
friends
ago.
is always
Yeah.
still going to be, even if it's a railroad, it's going to be a good time. If it's nothing goes catastrophically wrong, then nobody's really that mad about spending an evening playing a game with their friends. So you
Yeah,
can.
that's the trap of it, right? If Harmony had not capped off that session by saying, "I'm so glad you really liked it. This meant calling all of your moms and asking for your exact birth time was worth it," then the group wouldn't have fallen apart afterwards. But I'm glad that you were able to hold on to that happy memory.
Oh, guess what though? They're still together. They're actually my Godstein group now.
Oh.
Yeah. It was so many years ago.
That's hysterical.
Um,
Dragon says he disagrees with Harmony and he believes that one shots should be more purpose driven. I think
And
that
linear.
you can't really paint just the idea of a one shot with one broad brush. I mean, there are many, many different scenarios in which you would run a one shot, or why the players would want one, or what type of structure it would take. So, I mean, it's a multifaceted thing. Personally, when I've run one shots, it's almost always been to introduce my players to a new system or a new game. And in that case, it's very purpose driven because I'm there to show them how to play the game. And they usually have fun and they decide after that whether they want to continue with that system. The last one I did was basic fantasy. I play with guys that are fifth edition. They have no experience with BX or AD&D, anything like that. So I ran basic fantasy for them, and they enjoyed it. They made some mistakes, and but anyway, to make a long story short, ended up not going with basic fantasy. But in that case, the amount of prep, even for a structured one shot, was very minimal. I basically slapped down a piece of paper and drew a quick map of a region and doodled off a couple of destinations, and then they went and did whatever they wanted within that region. As a DM of any kind of fantasy game, you should be able to do that pretty easily. If there's a goblin cave, there's a town with something happening, and then there's some other things you can do. Maybe they stumble across it, and then you can kind of wing it. I don't think a lot of prep would be necessary in that case, but with this party, it seems like they were expecting a hell of a lot more than that.
I've found that like free form one shots in my experience have actually gone fairly well. To the point where if I'm but see, I've never tried one with like a brand new group. A lot of times, like right now, we've been playing Shadow Dark recently, and I've been kind of doing one shots with them. There's a couple areas that they can go to, and it's kind of like pseudo sandbox because it's meant to be like a 3 shot or so just to kind of learn the system. But yeah, I don't know. I found that like free form one shots for me, like I want them to work and I think they should work. I just haven't perfected the art of the free form one shot, and I'm working on it. because ideally that's my preferred way. Go on, Night Danger.
I was to say, I think I might. Maybe I'm alone here then, in that I really like running one shots, and I run. I generally we have our ongoing campaigns, and I'll run anywhere from 5 to 11 one shots every year.
Wow.
For our group, just because everything. I think I saw someone in the chat mention, like, as a palate cleanser, like you want to take a break from the heavy, the ongoing same old every week, and you just want to do something interesting. Like a year or two ago around Halloween, we did a one shot where we tried Dread, the horror game that uses the Jenga tower instead of the dice. Or I've used one shots to just test out an idea of everything from dabbling in writing a system to trying out weird settings or little rules light books that I've picked up. Uh, just just to try stuff. And when I was running a more conventional game like the uniparty pause time structure, if I had we never basically never canceled a game from people not showing up. And so if I got a couple messages like, hey, this week 4 out of our 7 guys are not going to be there, then I would say, oh, okay. I'd look through my folder of PDFs of, like, what's a game I've never run before, and then whip up a one shot and we run it that, so that the group still gets together, so that the game still happens, but it doesn't interfere with the get along gang march of victory and wonder that we were doing. And even when switching to like your kind of not always on, but your persistent Bro SR type strict time keeping games, I still will periodically throw in a one shot here or there, like, and the amount of prep that goes into that really depends on what type of one shot it is. Which is to say, if I'm doing any kind of investigative mystery, there's just more prep involved, because a mystery has to have there are questions that have to be answered ahead of time to run a satisfying mystery, and for it to not be a linear railroad, that requires a lot of time and a lot of planning. But at other times there's no prep at all. We did a one shot this past Christmas of Everyone is John. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of this game. It's a extremely rules light competitive RPG where all the players are different voices in the head of a schizophrenic man named John, and it's intended to be played slapstick and lighthearted. And yeah, so you get everything from I have no prep at all, I've just read the rules, to I spend 3-4 days in the evenings doing up some notes and getting some ideas down. And I do this stuff. I do them all the time. For a while, after I ran a big long fifth ed campaign a couple years ago, and after that, I wanted a change of pace, and we basically just did one shots or 1 to 3 sessions, just trying a whole bunch of systems. And eventually, we had a lot of fun. But eventually, my players were like, "All right, now it's time to lock into something extended again. Like, that's enough." So they had to pump the brakes on me and make me run more protracted stuff again.
So, question for, I guess, all three of you. What do you think is the preferred method for running a game, like I said, divorced from the permanency of a world? Do you, like, are you guys on the, dungeon crawl like dungeon crawl linear, not necessarily railroad, we'll say, but like just starting dungeon crawl? Or are you kind of on the free form, everybody, you're in a town, here's kind of what's going on around you, what do you guys want to do, we'll pants it? Like, is that the word, pantsing it? I think that's pantsing it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I saw that on Twitter. I'm not sure if that's a term, but we're gonna go with that.
It's
Like,
a
where
writing
do you guys
term,
fall on that spectrum? Okay.
I can speak
I
first.
am-
I
go for it.
I go for like what Tracy Hickman calls for like a closed matrix. So it's not a linear railroad. It's not an open world. It's they're given a few options and they can choose between those options. I think that makes for a good balance between a structured one shot and a totally open one shot. They can go to the mine, they can go to the caves, like the D&D arcade game, Tower of Doom or whatever it was called. That's the type of thing I usually lean towards if I'm going to do something divorced from like a longer, bigger campaign.
I'm going to say one-page RPGs, I think, are the best possible way to go with this. Yeah, I think one-page RPGs are sort of my favorite one-shots that I haven't run, but I have played in often because I'm usually DMing when I'm playing online, and I can often use the results from that game and like plop it somewhere in the ongoing campaign that I'm running because that is a persistent world, and that's a delight, especially because I get to again get some GM, I guess, training in there, and I also get to play as a player, which is nice. But usually they have a, I think it's related to the question, in that these one-page RPGs almost always have a goal, and you are free to pursue that goal. The goal is obvious, and you can do. I don't think that there's much point to to not having a goal in a game, and I don't think that there's much more of a point to like in a one shot having necessarily more than one, right? So you present a goal. If the players go off of that goal, that's totally fine. You're going to run that anyways. If you have a goal, then the players who would not know what to do otherwise are going to have an opportunity to are going to have something to fixate on and sort of train the brain on so that if they're playing in a normal campaign, they know how to respond to goals either that they've come up with or that somebody has sort of volunteered for them. If I'm playing Who Killed the Witch, a one-page RPG, the players do not actually need to go find who killed the witch. But if they would like something to kind of, get their feet wet, let's go find who killed the witch and branch out from there.
I had a question for the panel, if you don't mind. So you guys all write things, or have maybe some of you have published some things. So if you were writing a one-shot PDF to put up on some website for people to buy for like $2, and you want it to appeal to the widest gamer demographic possible, most people would be able to pick up this one shot and have fun with it. What type of structure would it take? What would you do in that case?
My gut reaction says a dungeon crawl. But Night Danger's shaking his head. He's like, no.
My answer to your question was going to be that dungeon crawls are the worst possible choice for a one shot. I would never run a dungeon crawl because all the coolest stuff about playing a dungeon crawler is the days and the weeks and the accumulation of going in, getting some resources, and then coming back and it's been restocked and it's different than you last remember. Like all the best stuff about dungeon crawling requires an ongoing campaign. I would never run a dungeon crawl as a one shot. So I have to write something down to answer Aries' question there. So if somebody else wants to answer first there.
Remember, this is the day that Night Danger completely destroyed me.
I'm going to go with a city crawl. I think that's some kind of, because here's the thing, my ideal is going to be a kind of greatest hits. And for one thing, I don't think that's difficult to do in a dungeon crawl at all. It's sort of an ideal format for doing greatest hits. But if I'm going to make it appeal to the widest possible audience, then I want to include some non-standard encounters or just non-combat encounters in general, or things that could be approached as like a non-combat encounter by default, meeting with the shopkeeper, meeting somebody at their home. That's going to be sort of my default translation, and then providing opportunities for like these kind of greatest hits. Like, all right, there's a hag living in this home. Go ahead and interact with this hag. She has a quest for you or a task for you that's somewhere else in the village or somewhere else in this, this populated area. And so you have a fun mix of sneaking, heisting, combat, probably anytime you're going underground in people's basements or in the sewers. And then above ground, you have this, I think that's why I like it. You have this clear divide between places where you can get away with fighting and places where you probably shouldn't be fighting. And it's easier to, I think, hit or to get all of your greatest hits or check off all of your greatest hit style encounters.
I kind of like that answer. And now that I've gotten to listen to everybody else's answer before making one, I'm gonna try and not say the B word because I've been told that people don't like it when I say the B word anymore. But if you were to introduce the only way, this is not the question. You did not ask about pre-gen characters, but I was thinking the greatest one shot I have ever been a part of. I did not run this. I was in it. Was one of those murder mystery parties. So what I would do for the greatest one shot would be to introduce competing goals and a fog of war by giving people pre-generated characters that have different attributes and probably all have a secret or a secret goal at the end of the game, which puts them, while they are maybe doing some adventure together, they may have some amount of competition between each other. Like I said, I'm not using the B word, but we all know what I'm alluding to. Maybe we
Bronze
don't.
team.
But yeah, that one. But that's probably what I would do. Now, that's not like a traditional RPG one shot. I see. Okay, we may lose Greg here from hurricane problems. It's
Oh
not because I
gosh.
said the B word. Yeah, I was there on Thursday. It's not fun. I hope your internet clears. If not, we appreciated having you, Greg.
Well,
Anyway,
I will
I
answer.
would.
Great. Oh,
Mhm.
go. No, you finish. Finish your thing.
No, no. I was done.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
The to answer Greg's question of what if I was to write something up and publish it, I would take the model that I've used for my Call of Cthulhu one shots. Well, when I've done Call of Cthulhu, it's usually been 1 to 5 sessions. We did one that went up to 12, but it was starting to get unstable at that point. Which often when people will do a mystery, you have a location A leads to location B, leads to location C, leads to the conclusion, and you might have forks in the road. The Alexandrian has a really great series of articles on node-based adventure design for this exact purpose, where things move, but then there's always this kind of draw back to a conclusion, and I've always hated that because it always feels like railroading with extra steps. But I'm quite fond of you have all these locations that are relevant to the investigation and they all have clues that might lead. So if you have location A and it can go to location B, C, or D, like there's clues that lead to all of those. And then location B has clues that go back to A to confirm your suspicions, but also clues that go to locations B and so on. And so I don't know how well this shows up.
It
Ah,
doesn't.
it doesn't at all. Alas.
No.
Okay,
It's
imagine you're just gonna have to shape rotate with your mind here. You have a location like a triangle, which is to say it has 3 locations that it could go to, and then each one of those like if you have a triangle, think like the Triforce, Zelda, where you have triangles made out of triangles. Does that make sense? Can you see that? Can you visualize it?
yes.
Each triangle is a location, a suspect, a person, and it folds out kind of indefinitely and feeds back. They all connect with each other, so you don't, instead of having a line of from location spreading out and then converging back to the solution, you have locations that spin outwards almost fractally, and over time you see more and more connections across them, but you never reach the final solution. And so it's like the win state is to discover that the conspiracy, the Cthulhu conspiracy or the secret cult or whatever, is actually too big for them to handle. It's the realization that the bureaucracy of conspiracy spirals out to such a scope that they can simply they could never handle it. And that's how I kind of capture the Lovecraftian sense of helplessness of scale, is by having these networks of suspects and over blackmail, treachery, occult, whatever. uh and that's how I would do it. I would structure it as you have these NPCs, you have locations, and it all starts with an initial crime, and you have the characters play cops. This is the big thing, is
I
how every time I've done this
Mhm.
and had it work, I have them all as police officers. So you start with a very small crime that just keeps getting weirder and weirder. It's like a Twin Peaks thing. It just keeps spinning out, and it never truly resolves. It just gets worse and worse and worse.
I have been looking for a place to watch that, but I will say all of my favorite, most of my favorite one shots that I've been in were Call of Cthulhu, actually. So you you may be onto something with that, and I hate to change the subject here, but we got a super chat from Mercurius, and thank you so much, Mercurius, for the $5. Instead of saying game redacted, say multi-objective games. That was mostly a joke. We will continue to say Bronstein here. Um, However, it's mostly a joke because I've been getting a lot of shit recently for talking about it too much. I do have other interests, guys, but in my mind, having giving people different objectives and secret information is one way to make a one shot work with where people have where you don't know the result of it. I don't know. I'm always happiest running when I don't know the result of it. Um, Sorry, Rube, were you trying to get a word in? Because I know I think there was some internet problems there with Night Danger for a second, but I'm not sure. It might be me too. I have no idea what's going on.
It's because I started talking about the conspiracy. They're trying to shut me down. I'm being subjected
Exactly.
to.
Suppressed.
I'm being suppressed by by the man.
Well, what kind of
The
man,
man has
anyways? No,
the
I don't
man
think
has
that it's really, I don't know. When it comes to a one shot, this is why I don't like running them. It's why I like playing in them, especially if it's an opportunity to go with like an additional, with like just a different game system or a game system that can be, that isn't really a system. It's sort of designed for a microcosm or an interruption into the rest of the campaign, or at the very least it could be played that way. You know, the mechanics of who killed the witch are not suited for D&D, but the events are. You know, if a bunch of forest animals, familiar spirits of this one witch, uh, happen to turn one of them, like the spider familiar, into a gigantic spider, and then there's this gnomish village that gets burned down and begins worshiping a spider god, and the witch in the nearby village is resurrected. That's something I can just like dump in. I can just dump that in an RPG. Like that's so I don't really see the point in one shots besides that as far as distractions go. So I don't really care what people are doing in that, you know?
yeah.
It's
I'm
like
gonna
the
say
difference between a one shot, like, sorry, the difference between like
mhm.
a linear game versus like a not linear game, or a prep game or a not prep game. It's a much lower consequence. So it doesn't feel like as important, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's why I think like the players should be able to just unravel everything in a one shot, unless
Mm.
I have like one caveat to this, and that is if you have an ongoing campaign, if there is a campaign world ongoing and you're like with a new group, I don't know, maybe it's like a family reunion or a party or something and they want to play D&D and they're like, "Hey, do you have like anything prepared for us to play?" And you're like, "All right, yeah, you can do a one shot in this world," right? Putting them into an established continuous world and letting them cause problems just for a one shot, that can be great to like put into a campaign and then you like go back to your other group and you're like, yeah, this other group of adventurers, they just came and looted this whole dungeon and used all the money to fund a criminal mastermind or criminal gang. I don't know what happened. You can deal with it now. Like
No,
that's how
that
I would do
rocks.
it, honestly. Yeah.
That's
Well, thank you.
fantastic. I got like a Brownstein for the Lancer game because there's a supplement. I just did a video on this plug. There's a supplement for not even Lancer. It's just a standalone sort of war game based on fleet scale combat for Lancer called Battle Group. And so I have people using that and the faction rules from another Lancer supplement to go on and give orders in the middle of a campaign, which Thunder Moose. who is not here, and it would be lovely if he was here, because he needs to make a new order, is is participating in that and actually interfered in one of the players' sessions, which is a lot of fun, right? That's an experience that you can get with one shots, right? Even if I ran that Bronstein as just a single session, the effects of that could be felt in my real campaign for a really long time. So if you have a way of making a one shot, like, I don't know, giving it consequences that extend out from a single night, perfect, beautiful.
I saw something that somebody had said on over on Twitter the other day, like when leading up to this, talking about one shots and prep and whatnot, um, which is that the problem with one shots is that if a new and with new campaigns, even just short lived campaigns, is that the general assumed culture of RPGs is that when you want to have a new campaign or a new game, often you're finding yourself looking for new players. Like it's, I want to try playing Call of Cthulhu, so now I need to find a group to play Call of Cthulhu with. Especially if you have a group that is locked in to a particular system. Like, oh, my players won't do anything but fifth ed, and I want to try this other system, so I need to find another group. And the idea that you have to constantly rebuild the social fabric, rebuild the familiarity every time you want to try a new game, is makes it difficult to try new stuff, but it also makes it difficult to, even from a campaign perspective, but it makes it difficult to just dip your toes into things from time to time. And this is where I think Mr. Bradford Walker, the discussion of like the clubhouse, the idea of a persistent group that games together and doesn't necessarily just play one campaign or one ongoing system or setting all the time. I've been reading Tony Bath's Ancient Wargaming, which is like primordial early wargaming text, and in it he talks about how the early days of his wargaming club, if they were at his house, they were playing ancients. They were going to do Greeks and Macedonians and Romans, but if they were over at the other guy's house, they were doing Napoleonics. And I think that sort of environment, if it can be fostered, leads to the availability of one shots being more regular and a good time, but also in tangent or in conjunction with an existing ongoing campaign. If you just have a group of people who regularly game together and play lots of different games together, you're able to support both modes of play, because they are very different and they have different outcomes, and they have different gelatinous, if you're out of the loop on the Lancer beef, it's that Ares here is making a kaiju game, a mecha versus kaiju game, specifically because he does not like Lancer.
Oh,
It's
okay.
all out of the open now. It's over. So
So
I was-
fight.
no. Stay away from me. Don't hurt me.
We're
I
allowed
was
to like
actually
them.
just pretending to understand that. So I'm glad you said it.
No, I think more people should be striving to build a table culture where when they're at Ares' house, they play Titans of the Ruined Earth?
Titans of Fallen Earth. Yep.
Titans of Fallen Earth. They play Titans of the Fallen Earth, and when they're at James's house, they play Lancer, and everyone there's that kind of push and pull and that give and take, and the only way that you can have this is if you have a long-standing, strong social fabric of people who like each other and want to hang out, but also if people game more, if they play games more often, if you're playing more than once a week, if you're doing that, and that means sacrificing other hobbies. It means playing less video games. It means watching less television. It means making, in order to have the maximum benefit of the hobby, I think you have to give it a larger share of your time than most people do. And especially players. Players give the hobby staggeringly little of their time, and they deserve all the suffering that they receive because of this.
Well, that was controversial. Um,
What?
no, I'm just kidding. Um, wow. I don't know how to follow that, Night Danger. Um,
It was because
I can
it was
only,
an unhinged ramble. That's why.
I maybe. Um, wow.
She's flustered.
I think a lot of it is fair though. Um, I kind of want to go into some Twitter comments because there was one of them. Now I'm gonna share my screen. Oh boy, Harmony uses technology. Let's go. I think okay. I believe he's in chat right now. He may or may not be. He was in chat earlier. Driving and Dragons was his name. Made this comment on Twitter, and I know this is one. Let me make this bigger. This is like not big. Here we go. Um, this is kind of going to a different topic here. He made this comment on Twitter around the discussion of prepping for one shots. And I know the reason I'm bringing this up, Night Danger, is because you said in chat, like, this one made you think. And I like every comment on my posts. So um, so I did like this one. I don't agree with it, and I'm having trouble articulating why, because I think it's a good argument, but I don't think I agree with it. And Daniel, this is, I believe, Driving in Dragons. I believe he's in chat. Yeah, he is in chat. He's right here. All right. He says, first, no prep doesn't exist. You're just using someone else's prep. Second, it depends entirely on play style and how good you want your game sessions to be. So I think we want to address the no prep doesn't exist. You're just using someone else's prep. Now, Night Danger, you're the one that brought up this
What's that
comment,
in
and I kind
response
of
to,
want to
by
hear.
the way?
Go ahead.
Just
Yeah,
briefly, what's that in
it was
response to?
yeah, it was how much, since no one can agree with how much prep is required for a one shot, because there was kind of an argument in my comments about that. Everyone has different ideas of how much prep we require for this, or how much prep is required for this. Daniel weighed in, and he actually, I haven't seen this argument before. So I kind of want to talk about it, especially since Night Danger brought it up in another chat. So I don't know if you had anything you wanted to say about that to start, or
Yeah, sure.
yeah.
The first statement is sort of true. It's almost true. Which is that
Oh no.
oh, am I breaking up?
Night Danger, Night Danger. I think is it his internet or is it me?
No,
Oh,
I hear him breaking up as well.
okay.
Testing. La di
All
di
right, you're
da.
good, Night Danger.
All right. It's almost true that no prep doesn't exist. You're just using someone else's prep. If you take like obviously, prep has a very specific meaning. It gets you can understand lots of things as preparing for the game. But when people say no prep, they really do mean I'm not sitting down and drawing a dungeon and writing up NPCs and filling out my hex map before the game. They're talking about using procedural generation. And so, sure, you're using someone else's prep in that you're using the procedures of the game to generate a game. But you're using someone else's prep got me thinking about music and performing and playing music, which is that very little of improvisation when if you've ever been in like a jazz group or done any kind of musical performance that requires a lot of improvising. You're very little of what you do is purely emergent, spontaneous magic that is being generated live and in the moment by your mind. What you're doing is you're pulling from a huge catalog of little licks, little melodies, little motifs, relations, ideas that you've accumulated over years and years of practice and years of learning other people's songs, experimenting on your own, trying stuff. And so the someone else's prep is there in the form of, I think, in the form of muscle memory, in the form of the ambient background experience that just comes from running lots of games. That's what makes no prep possible, is the prep of putting in your reps and learning and practicing and familiarizing yourself with the standards. if when someone says I don't need to prep to run a goblin cave, it's because they've run many goblin caves. They've seen other people run goblin caves. They've played under GMs who run goblin caves. They've read modules that have goblin caves, and so they have all this ambient experience that allows them to improvise a goblin cave with no intentional preparation.
Or
But the
they've simply read The Hobbit.
or they've read The Hobbit. Well, that's what I mean is that like the idea of like when the Broasar guys talk about leaning into Appendix N tropes, it's about building a catalog of licks and ideas in your head that you can pull live at the table without thinking about, without consciously or actively orchestrating it to happen. And I think that's like the difference between, to continue the music metaphor, composition versus improvisation, composing and writing versus jamming. And the no prep, when I've run sessions with no prep, it is very much like jamming in that you have to riff off the players a lot. It's dependent on the energy of the room, and yeah, I think it's a statement that I almost agree with, but I disagree simply because no one actually treats past experience as prep when talking casually. You can argue that it is prep, but no one uses the word that way.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Crossface on this one, and that most people seem to misunderstand what prep is. And I think the general understanding, even from the reactionary, "Oh, I'm a no prep guy," even from that perspective, is the idea that you are spending time to create something, right? So that's different from spending 30 minutes to get out all your books and to distribute character sheets and get out your miniatures. You spent 30 minutes to do that, but that's not prep in the way that people think of like the game. Like you're not spending 30 minutes creating new content for the game. I think that's the difference in semantics that a lot of people seem to miss.
Yeah. No prep is just like no bespoke, right? I'm
Right.
not custom designing encounter tables. I'm not custom designing encounters ahead of time for the interaction. The no prep, and I some of this did get lost in translation, which is unfortunate, but what can you do? It's directionally correct. No prep is just not creating a bunch of bespoke content when rolling on a dungeon floor table will do, and that the existence of that of Appendix A telling you what kind of shape your dungeon will take or what kind of enemies are going to be present inside that dungeon doesn't constitute prep. I don't think at all. It's just
Right.
it's not prep to just like know the rules of the game and say, okay, I know how attacks work, I know how hit points work, I know how death works, I know how spells work, I know how the equipment works, and my players are going to mash themselves. I know how combat works, and they're going to mash themselves into the situation. I don't know what game elements are going to be involved, or I'm not deciding which game elements are going to be involved in these encounters. I just know that there will be encounters. I'm leaving those game elements up to the game, and when they appear, I will run them. So I don't
Yeah.
consider charts prep. That's just part of the game.
Yeah, it's like I wouldn't even consider spending 18 hours to read the three core rule books of AD&D backwards and forwards. So let's say you spent 18 hours on that. That's still not prep. You're just learning the rules of the game. You're not creating bespoke content to give to your players for the game. You're just figuring out the rules. Like, and so there's kind of a semantic misunderstanding there that a lot of people seem to have about what prep is and what constitutes no prep, and that I really think it has to do with the expenditure of time and what that time is being used on.
Yeah,
I
like
think the oh, go ahead.
I would say that there is obviously a difference between uh, uh, I'm trying to learn Axe right now. I'm trying to familiarize myself with Axe in my free time, and reading Axe or generating a hex map using the procedures of Axe. One of those things is prep, and the other is definitely not. one of them is, as you say, like generating content for the table. That is what we would mean by prep. Whereas learning the rules so that you can generate the content in the first place is probably not within the category. There's a comment in the chat here from Mr. Max. You can prep and not rely on chart, internalize the chart. And I can hear his wonderful Quebecois accent in my mind when I read that. It's that I think is exactly true. There's one of the old guys, one of the original like people who played with Gary back in the 70s, and at conventions he runs from the 3 Little Brown Books OD&D, and he does it without the books present because he's been running it for so long and he's so familiar with the procedures of that game that he knows exactly what the encounter tables are for any given level of a dungeon, or how the reaction mechanics work, and all of that is just the process of putting in the work of internalizing the system of the game, internalizing the procedures, and also the experience and the skill of knowing how to play off the people at your table to produce what a game that is satisfying and that matters. There's yeah, and I will say I'm quite happy to see in the chat. I see a number of people saying that they did jazz at some point in their life, so that's always great. I'm glad I'm not alone on that. I'm just seeing here.
So I think the difference is between campaign prep and session prep. I mean, do I prep for campaigns? I absolutely prep for campaigns. I know what's going on in the world, at least to a certain degree. Like, there's some things that I don't know about the world, but my players kind of made the world that I'm talking about, so they know and I don't sometimes. That's a different discussion. But anyway, I definitely prep for campaigns. I know the rules of the game. I know like somewhat what's going on. I have improvisation skills. I have stuff to draw back on if I need it. Um, However, I don't generally do a whole lot of prep for session by session because I don't know what the players are going to do. And you might say, oh, that's their fault for not telling you what they're going to do. And yeah, maybe they should. But even when I ask them, it's like a lot of times they don't know until it comes up, or they'll tell me and then they'll change their minds, whatever. I usually don't know when they're going to do what, or what wild idea they have. Like right now, I think they're trying to I'm not sure if they're trying to take over or destroy a casino cult right now. But I'll figure that out. I don't know. So I prep for the campaign, but I don't really prep that much for sessions, if at all. Like sometimes I like to have something ready, but most of the time I just kind of wing it, knowing what's going on in the world. And I do think that's the difference. I think it's kind of a semantics thing. And also I think that it makes the word prep virtually meaningless to consider previous reading prep. Like I might draw on something that I've read 6 years ago, but was I prepping for the game when I was reading 6 years ago? No. And I do think that what's the word? That makes the word fairly meaningless to
Yeah.
expand it to include all things.
Do you think objections like this are real when they're saying stuff like this? Well, having a table is prep, or having a procedure for attacking in combat is prep.
In this specific example, I do like to think that Daniel, or Driving in Dragons, is acting in good faith because he has been very he has been very cool with me previously. So in this specific example, yes, I do believe that the comment was in good faith.
But with every other major argument, like on Twitter about role-playing games, because someone says no prep, and then there's a bunch of people that are very reactionary about it, and then they get angry, and then they're like, well, you read the book, that means you're prepping, and then it just turns into stupidity. So
Well,
yeah, those arguments do exist.
As soon as you make a normative claim that your way of running the game will produce a superior experience, anyone who doesn't play the game that way is going to be naturally either defensive or curious. Those are really your only choices. If you say to me, I've been running the game this way, and it is objectively better than the way you've been running the game. My only choice is to either get really mad at you about it and dig my heels and try to prove that my way is actually better, or adopt your way.
I think
Right. It's just that there's two ways of doing that. Like I think that my game actually produces a superior experience. I am not afraid of a mountain appearing suddenly in the campaign. Or there's the second kind, which is some means of tearing down your definitions to say that there is no right way to play. So I get suspicious when I see the language of the enemy, which is claiming that there is no right way by either undercutting the definitions or saying it outright.
Oh yeah, well there's good arguments and bad arguments. There's good refutations and there's sophistry. That's just going to be the case for any given any field of conversation.
Sure, just this specific field has a pattern.
Yeah, no, I
it's like
understand.
the club that has the
sure.
you get
And
what I mean.
I think that Twitter, I think that part of this is just the nature of Twitter, that when you when you condense broad subjects down into a couple words like hashtag no prep, meaning when, yeah, of course you prep the campaign and there's like some that goes into it, right? That stuff is what takes off, and it doesn't take off when you say, I think less prep is good, guys. No, that doesn't take off. No prep takes off because that's just the nature of Twitter. And so I think that causes people to speak in a little bit more rhetoric rather than specific fleshed out ideas, because Twitter.
Dogmatism
So
is
yeah,
snazzy.
exactly. So I do think that there's some of that going on where people are seeing no prep and they're like, no, excuse me, because this can be personal, because there are people who spend like hundreds of hours prepping a campaign. I mean, I've spent, I don't want to, I am happy not knowing how much time in my life I have spent prepping RPGs. I don't want access to that number, you know? And I still prep. I prep for campaigns, not for sessions, if that makes sense. And while we're on the subject of prep, actually, I do want to, somebody mentioned crossface. I think it was Greg that mentioned crossface.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do want to bring up one of his tweets because I think this is I think this kind of encapsulates it pretty well. He tweeted recently, and this took off. As he says, the skill to run zero prep means that when you are at a friend's house unprepared, they surprise you that they have bought D&D and they want you to DM. Do you say, "Oh no, I haven't prepared," or do you know how to run D&D? That's all it comes down to. And I think that sums it up better than I could. Now, of course, in this case, I do think this is directly related to the subject of running one shots too, because a lot of times when you are in a position where you want to run a one shot, like with a family or a friend who asks, like, "Can you run D&D? I want to try this game," or any other RPG. It might be it might be something completely different. Like, do you have the skill to run it? I think that is what it comes down to.
That tweet basically summarizes it perfectly. Crossface once again earning his spot in like top 3 best accounts on the website. But the that exact circumstance happened to me really early in my DMing experience, which is that I had a bunch of guys over for Canada Day. We were just hanging out. We're having a barbecue, and one of the guys was like, "Oh, we got our regular group here. Let's play some D&D." And I didn't have my material for the next session. This is when we were playing fifth ed. I didn't have the material for the regular campaign, and nobody had their character sheets, and so I just improvised something on the fly, and there was a giant beaver because it was Canada Day, and like a giant beaver monster, and you riff on it, but it was not great. It was not the worst session I've ever run, but it also wasn't the best. But it was a massive eye opener because it was like, hey, wait a minute, you don't need to be finely tuning 2 to 5 encounters every week. and figuring out exactly when to spring them on the players, you can just kind of fly by the seat of your pants with the familiarity you have with the system, and it's okay. And it was rough this time, but maybe next time it'll be a little better, and you'll get better at it, and this will get easier over time. Which is really why I bring up the music and the jazz example. Is that's the experience of being thrown into a jam for the first time, and somebody asks you to like take a solo on a song, or throws you into a song that you've never played before, and they just kind of hand you the chord sheet or the changes, and you just have to you gotta figure it out. Is it's very liberating to be put in that experience of, oh, I don't know what to do, and then realizing that it was fine, and that it was that you had a good time, and that and looking back and being like, wow, I learned like 6 new things while I did that. That's a useful experience.
And I hate to change the topic here, but we got a super chat from Crafty Matt. He says, X is for extreme takes and trolling, no in between. I try to bring polite conversation back. Sometimes I reach my limits, but I try my best.
If you're not on the internet
Thank
to have
you
a
for
good
the
time, you
$2.
shouldn't be on the internet. That's rule number 1.
Yes. I enjoy the RPG discourse that happens on Twitter. I'm just gonna say it. I think it's fun. But also I think what people miss a lot of times is just because someone says this is the superior way to run your game, you should run your game this way, this produces the best results, the frequently across many tables, you should do this. That doesn't mean you have to do it. Like you don't need people's approval to run your game the way you want. And I think it's perfectly okay to go around saying, yes, this is the objectively correct way to run, because like, I do think that people should be capable of seeing a take like that and being like, no, I think that's completely wrong, and I'm not going to do that to my game, and you guys have fun, whatever. I don't need your approval, you know?
If you don't think that the way that you play the game is a superior way to do it, why are you doing it?
Exactly. No, I totally
This
agree
this
with that.
this applies to everything. If you don't think that the thing you're doing is the best course of action, why are you doing it that way?
Could ask that about anything, yeah. Right. So we've kind of gone through some like different methods to running a one shot and different ways that you could do it. Um, I do think that it comes down to practice, to knowing the system, to having kind of a repertoire of literature or previous experience to draw from, which I'm not sure if I don't think I categorize as prep, but I do think it comes from that. However, I'm saying the best way to run is free form, let the players do what they want to do. But I'm going to be very honest about this and say I have not run what I consider a successful free form one shot. I haven't. I've played in one, but I haven't run one that I would consider to be like that. So when I say that I think that the best practice for a one shot is for it to be free form, I think that is in the optimal conditions of a GM who understands how to run freeform games for a one shot. And I don't know that I am there on one shots. I run freeform campaigns, but for one shots, that's incredibly difficult. I've got to say, and I know that's like a big admission for me, I feel like, but I haven't run one that I would consider successful to be freeform. I'm still young. Oh, thank you.
It's a big problem with clarity in the RPG space, especially because there are so many different play styles or non-play styles, people just sort of randomly doing things. Because they've either fallen into a rut or they found something that seems to reach an equilibrium within their personal group, but they might not necessarily recommend that for everybody else. They get stuck in these places where they're not really willing to. It makes it more difficult to either design content and to run RPG campaigns to begin with. In an RPG campaign, at the very least, you can sort of establish and ease people into the ideas of like freeform play. But in a one shot, you're sort of just like throwing people into the frying pan. And if they jump, they don't know whether to jump out of the frying pan and into the fire. They don't know really what they're going to do here, and so you can double down on clarity, and potentially at the cost of freeform, or you can double down on freeform, definitely at the cost of clarity. So it's not a pleasant state to be in. It's why I generally don't like running one shots.
I too am a long campaign person, but I guess when I say I haven't run a successful freeform run one shot, I kind of I've run a fairly successful like Bronstein like experience, but I'm not sure that it's the same thing. If I don't know how to reconcile that, to be honest. I
No,
guess
I
I'm
think
not
you're
totally
right.
there. Yeah.
Because your Bronstein, I guess,
Mhm.
ran for like a session. Or if you
It
take
ran
a
for two. It ran for
two
about 8
sessions.
hours total. Yeah, 8 hours total
All
was
right.
roughly what it ran for.
And then your
So
RPGs one shots are usually going to be between like
they're
one
usually
to
like
two
3 or 4
sessions.
sessions. Yeah, they're usually
Three or
like three or
four.
four
Okay.
sessions. So I'm not sure if they're considered one shots, but
Yeah.
just a single standalone, just 4 hour adventure. I've had trouble with it.
RPGs aren't
And
really conducive
mhm,
to doing that. Yeah.
yeah,
No,
it's
no, they
difficult.
absolutely, definitely are. It
Ooh, I
just,
want to hear
it's,
No, of
this.
it
course
was,
not.
no, they absolutely are. It just, it requires a different set of priorities when thinking about how you're going to incentivize the players, and it requires a different expectation of what the outcome will be. But the
That's why they're not
RPG,
suited to it. Because
huh?
RPGs are naturally, as a medium, suited to freeform play across a wide spectrum of time, and a
Well,
wide
but
spectrum of goals that you can chase over like potentially months or even years.
potentially,
So
but
if the
not
medium is
necessarily.
set for that, well, that's the expectation because that's the
Potentially is not
advantage
the
of the
same as
medium.
necessarily. Like even if we just look at the first the actual first Broadstein with Wesley, it was intended to be it's intended to be a standalone thing that you do and then it's over. And you do it and you can do it
Okay.
again with and you can change the scenario. It's like scenario based play has been present in RPGs since the very beginning.
Yes.
It's part of the DNA, and to just do a scenario in a single moment, I would say that for it to work, there's a number of variables that have to be in place. First, it has to be a well thought out scenario. It has to be a scenario that provides good incentives for the players to be proactive and especially and a little aggressive because a cautious or slow or meek player is going to be useless. They're going to be a net drag on the excitement and the enjoyment of a one shot because you have a finite amount of time because you're trying to have things boil over in a short period of time. So first, you need a well-designed scenario, and then you need good players. You need players who know what they're doing, who know the system, and who know that they are there for. They're there for a one shot, like that they're
Yeah.
intentional about it. And finally, I think that you need to have a lot of familiarity with those players. I think a good one shot is not well played with a group that is just getting to know each other. I think to really get the maximum enjoyment out of one shots, having played in some, having run some, you really need to have a good, long-standing, established relationship with the people you're and in particular, a lot of experience at the table with them, because as the GM, it means that I can anticipate with fairly reliable accuracy the actions of my players because I've played with them for a long time. I know what they're like. I know how they think, and that allows me to work in the accelerated timescale of a one shot. Like if you think of the difference
Right.
between Big Trouble in Little China. I hope you've seen that movie. Or just really any action adventure fantasy movie, and Game of Thrones or some other television series, like the television series versus the film. Films are they're both in a lot of ways working in the same medium. They're using the same techniques, but the time scale and is totally different, and so the level of intensity and the pacing is totally different. And
Yes,
but
for all those
it's
variables that you just listed that must be in place and set before the session begins and cannot be eased into or adjusted during the course of the session because that doesn't work in that time scale is why it's not a good fit for RPGs.
but when it works, it's a blast. It's a magnificent and wonderful experience that is
I totally
unique.
agree.
But that is unique to the one shot. And so it's using the same toolkit to produce a different experience, but it's still the same toolkit. It's still an RPG, and it works, and it's well suited.
No,
It's
because everything that you just listed, players that you know ahead of time, people that you know, a scenario that has been developed ahead of time and has been prepped unmistakably in this
All
case.
right.
There's no argument to be had about that. Everything else that you've described so far are variables that are not required for an RPG campaign to function because an RPG campaign can develop these positive variables over the course of, again, months or years. And so they are not required, and the RPG campaign is developed without them in mind, whereas a one shot can't. And so I agree that you can run a one shot using the same tools that you might run a successful improv, but this is distinct, I think, by its description from a normal RPG campaign and distinct from the toolbox that you would use.
no. Okay, hold on. Listen.
Okay.
Dunder Moose is here. Woo! Everyone celebrate. Everyone.
I gotta interrupt you guys. Two things. I'm sorry. First of all,
Am I interrupting
the moose
something?
is loose. No,
I'm going to
we are
war
happy
here.
to have you.
I apologize.
You found yourself
No.
on one of those internet blood sports shows. That's what's going
Yeah,
on
no,
now.
well, I was
Second
saying
of all-
I don't feel bearded enough to come into the middle of this.
I can share.
Second of all,
I gotta get
I
this off
do
me
want to
anyways.
respond to a super chat real quick. I apologize. This was the most fire RPG debate on the internet, and I just interrupted it for a super chat. But thank you, John Miller, for the $10. He says tournament adventures are a good example of one shots designed to be completed within 3 hours. They are indeed very different from a typical campaign use adventure. I think he's correct. However, I think we've been kind of talking about whether or not the typical dungeon crawling one-shot scenario is in fact the best way to run a one-shot. And I don't know that it is. I have run some of those Adventurers League stuff. Of course not. Thank you. Okay, I was being charitable. But I appreciate it, John. I have run some of those Adventurers League one-shots, and those have produced varying results. And also Snake Oil Sean, thank you for the $5. I appreciate it. Anyway, we have Dunder Moose now. Dunder Moose,
Yes.
I have so much to ask you, but
Okay.
I don't even know where to start.
Is this ridiculous? Should I take this thing off?
You should take that ridiculous thing off.
Sorry about
would
that.
you? Oh my
God,
goodness!
you're bald. Oh.
So if you wouldn't mind taking just a brief moment, like gather the questions you want to ask Dunder Moose, I want to send a possible meeting the halfway with James here on the one shot thing, which is that all of the variables that I've listed, I don't think are obstacles to I don't see them as frustrations of the natural expression of an RPG, but rather like the satisfaction of a campaign that lasts a long time, the ability, the conditions that enable a good one shot are something that is developed and earned over time, just the same as a satisfying and dynamic game state is earned and developed over time. These are so like all the things I listed as being necessary for a good one shot, I also think are necessary for a good campaign. It's just that the campaign has the luxury of taking the time to cultivate them at a slower pace. But they're all still the same necessary conditions. I don't know if maybe that's a compromise that you can stomach, but
I mean, you have me for a little bit. That like I can definitely understand how people might be in the course of spending time with each other in a hobby are going to be friendlier with each other, probably, hopefully, from a higher standpoint, to a higher degree than when they initially started. It's not required for a campaign. It's not required to run a campaign or, frankly, to play in one. You can have people in relatively hostile social relationships in a campaign, and this can be smoothed over, ignored in favor of good play because there's good mechanics to work with. Whereas these conflicts in a one shot just completely annihilate it.
I would make a mild correction there to clarify. I don't, when I say that, talk about like the pre-existing relationships, I'm not talking about a friendship. I'm not, you don't even have to particularly like the guy. It can be like an open table, like a poker night or a board games club or whatever. It's not about familiarity in the sense of intimacy or friendship. It's familiarity in that you have an idea of how that person behaves, and you are able to anticipate their typical behaviors. You're able to anticipate how they will generally respond to circumstances. And it's the same as, again, it's back to playing music together. The longer you play with someone, even if you hate the guy, some of the best bands in the world are made of people who hate each other. But it's that consistency and that familiarity that allows for
socially
effective
legible
dynamism
rather
to
than necessarily being friendly with each other. No, I can agree with that. And I still just don't think it has anything to do with running a successful RPG campaign. I think those
but it is a good
unique to
expression of the
running
RPG.
one-shots.
All right, let's kind of bring it back to we have Dunder Moves, guys.
I don't know that
And,
I would have anything to say that is as good as this back and forth right now.
Yes. I was just going to ask if either you or Greg had anything to add to this, because this is a good back and forth. Yes. And I hate to interrupt it. I've interrupted it twice. You guys, oh gosh, they're never going to come back on.
No, I have nothing to add.
He's
All
just
right.
vibing.
Hey, Greg, it's good to be on a stream with you, man. I don't know if we've ever done this before.
Hello. No, I haven't.
Rock on, bro. Have we? I mean, I was driving back from a marching band competition, so I was listening, but I had like one
Music
bar.
again.
Yeah. So I think I'm caught up. Did we ever get to the root of why do we do a one shot in the first place? What is the function?
Because it's so much fun,
one-shot.
Jan.
Is it so? What I heard Night Danger talking about was like, I got my guys where I do not play the tuba, Phineas. I'm a trumpet guy all the way.
Ban him. Mods, kill this man.
There is one person on this panel who knows how to play the tuba, and it's not Dunder Moose.
Wait, did you play the tuba?
What, me?
Yeah.
I did for 7 years, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Did you march? Were you in marching band
no,
harmony?
No.
I saw a dude straight up. He was marching, but they didn't give him one of the sousaphones. He had the whole thing up on his shoulder. I was like, props to that guy.
That's how you get the traps.
Yeah,
It's
or
like
at least
deep
one.
harmony lore. The tuba is like real deep harmony lore.
Okay, sorry.
I'm so sorry.
So what is so like I heard Night Danger saying, well, I've got the same group of guys. We have an ongoing campaign. It's super lit, but every now and then we want to try something different, like Halloween. Let's do something a little spooky, right? So either you maybe get the Halloween module. Have we talked about that? Is that verboten to talk about? Or a totally new rule set that nobody's played that everyone kind of wants to try, but it's not their main thing, right? Like Night Danger was like, well, we played Dread, we played
Call of Cthulhu,
the Who
Mothership.
John Malkovich. Gelatinous Rube was talking about the Who Killed the Witch. Nobody brought up R-Dub's AIDS puppy. Can you find the source of the AIDS? But I don't know if you guys have talked about like what is your feeling on just going to the store and buying a Halloween one shot published, whether it's third party or like just going to the back of Curse of Strahd and running Death House, like, or is that do we not talk about? Is that too icky?
I think it's to play a board game under the pretense, a board game for a single night under the pretense of playing an RPG, which is fun and entertaining and I love. Right? If I could do strip poker under the pretense of playing an RPG, I would probably have fun with my same group there. I just would never say that strip poker uses the same toolbox to make it fun as an RPG.
You just couldn't be more wrong. I think that I do think that
Everybody's
the
been using
Halloween
analogies today. I had to pick one in.
Brings new
the
meanings to the root of the terms thick and chunky.
the Halloween example is useful just because I really think that horror is uniquely really well suited to one shots because it so often ends with the player characters either insane or dead or
Yes.
in some kind of hopeless circumstance, and so you can, as the GM, in a lot of ways, you can think of running a horror one shot as though I'm starting a new campaign using Call of Cthulhu or whatever horror system to your taste, and you're just, as the GM, you're just really taking the gloves off, like you're really just not pulling any punches, and
Yeah.
and just frankly just be mean about it, and it creates an experience that will generally last anywhere from 1 to 7 sessions, and is great. But it is different than
Do you have
like a
them bring
grand
their
fantasy
own?
campaign.
Do you have them
It
bring
is
their
a
own
role playing
players
game,
that
but it
they've
is a
been?
different than a fantasy game.
Do you have to bring the players that they've been like attached to and rolling with into the horror, knowing that hey, this could wipe your dude out? Are you gonna like flip the table if that happens, or do you say no? Let's give everybody a pre-gen. Let's start them off fresh, and then risk. Well, the thing about horror is you have to care about the person who's going through the meat grinder. So like, if I know this is my first time playing, whatever schlub I roll up, am I gonna be like just waiting for the hilarious death? Like that's the thing for me. Like for especially this Halloween. And I'm sorry if I'm taking us off on a different direction, but like for
October's
me,
right around the corner, so
October is the one shot. Like even Rick Stump, who's been running a game for 45 years, will still go do one shots on Halloween because it's just October, right?
yeah.
So, but here's the thing: is D&D is already pretty horrific. Like I don't know what you have to add to it to get it to horror.
Well, that was a James Rajai. He realized, he's like, if you just take all the assumptions of BX at face value with no soft focus lens, it's a horrifying
Yeah.
premise. And so that's how Lamentations of the Flame Princess figured out their branding and made basically all the best OSR products ever.
Yeah, but if you don't want to like have dead people with their boobs out, like what can you play?
Well, so
Has
sorry, there
anybody
was that
played
comment
At the
there.
Mansions of At the Mansions of Madness? Just quickly.
No.
It's a
I
board
have
game
that.
that was produced. Yes, it was a board game produced by, I believe, the same people who made
Fantasy
Call of
Flight, yeah.
Cthulhu.
I have it back there, yeah.
It's a
Yeah, yeah.
fantastic horror game. It replaces this need to be attached to your character, I think, with just the same feeling, which is adrenaline and a outlook of I cannot save the situation. I can only keep things from getting worse.
That's the one where like each room you put like random cards face down and you put a card on top of it and they have to
Yeah.
That
research
is
it
correct.
and figure out what they just found. And you have
Yeah.
Shoggoth minis.
It's
Yeah.
horror, absolutely, and it's fantastic. But I think that it helps demonstrate, like, okay, Harmony, you've played it.
Yes.
First
Just like
question: Did you
once.
feel that it
Mhm.
like felt horrific in a sense, or that it felt like in line with horror?
I think a lot of running any sort of horror game has to do with the environment, and I played it in a game shop, so
Mm.
I didn't. The mechanics themselves didn't do it for me as far as horror goes. So I'm gonna go ahead and say no. I probably would say I had a more horrific experience playing Arkham Horror than Mansions of Madness.
Hmm.
But it's still of the same variety of a horror board game that has kind of a role playing aspect to it. Yeah.
So
Right.
I did publish a Halloween one shot last year and released it on Halloween, and it does have OSR rules. And some people have enjoyed it, but in order to get the scares across, it had to be very objective focused. The players had to have the buy-in of, no, we're not looking at a region map of different things to accomplish here. You're investigators going to a town to explore this evil, and you can explore the town and talk to everyone, and different evil, weird things happen to you in there, and eventually you uncover clues. But yeah, I mean, as a role-playing game, it would work in the long term. I don't see a problem with translating that to a longer campaign. Certainly possible.
So opening that up to the panel then, because Thunder Moose, you brought horror up as like the ideal, it's kind of the ideal one shot,
Yes.
because you have an opportunity to get people fresh, I guess. We're gonna get rid if horror requires people to kind of like buy in and let go of their previous expectations or rose tinted glasses, then horror's the way to go, right? Especially around Halloween. So do you take that's you take these connection of variables, a lot of which are outside of your control, and do you say, are you inclined to think that that's the same toolbox that you have to run a campaign? Or is that a toolbox that's sort of bespoke and unique to your circumstance?
That is an excellent question. I feel like fifth edition is, and I'm not the first to say this. This is going to be cliche, but like the characters start off very powerful, and by the time you're level 5, um, they are amazing, and it's hard to make people like that scared, especially without having them just take a short rest every so often, and just getting all their crap back.
Very hard to kill.
1E, you're very much more vulnerable starting off, but it's still got the same, like, on a character level, you're still just trying to get gold and XP so you can level up, and eventually you're going to conquer the Borderlands in the name of law and set up your own rule. Like the end state of Keep on the Borderlands is like you evict the steward or whatever, and you become the new force for good in the region. So for both of those, your goal is getting more powerful. And I feel like horror does something else where either you're face to face with your own limitations, or you find yourself turning into the monster. You become the thing which is abhorrent. And so I don't know how you shoehorn that into an ongoing campaign, right? Like it seems to me like these things are set up for you bring in new characters that they can get attached to and like, but they can't get mad when they all die because this was purposefully a vulnerable situation. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
I
I
think
think of it as like a medieval X-Files type
Okay.
of scenario where, like in the horror one shot, if they do survive, the characters do survive, the opportunity for the campaign exists because then they are these successful kind of detective people who have survived this horror scenario. So you can continue sending them on similar types of scenarios and building scenarios for them. So it's like the X-Files. You can have monster of the week type of things that they need to go explore.
there's also the you could put it into an ongoing campaign if you're just using different characters. Like the players haven't gone to a place to say, okay, make pre-gens. They get corrupted and eventually destroyed by madness and end up like killing each other in some, I don't know, haunted mansion or something. And then the actual PCs of the ongoing campaign like come across the mansion. They're like, oh, and they I know they shouldn't use meta knowledge, but they do.
Or one lives
And
to
you can
tell the
like,
tale and gets back to the
yeah,
village.
ooh, yeah. Or you
Harrowing.
can like put it in like a newspaper in the world or something like that. So the actual PCs, the actual heroes have the it can happen in the world and affect the world around it without being part of the ongoing campaign, if that makes sense. Or the main one. Yeah. That's probably what I'd do with it.
I
Rock
definitely
on.
think that you can lock in. You can absolutely just in an existing ongoing campaign, do a little scary session, and you can even do it with like the existing characters. Like you can just do a session. It's like, hey, it's Halloween and something spooky's happening, right? You can do that. But to James's question, is it the same toolkit to do this in a one shot versus to do this in a campaign? I would say yes, just because I've used the same methodology to establish a longer running ongoing campaign as I used to establish a one shot using the same not the same system, but this like I used the the same legwork that goes in before launching the campaign, and the same approach to executing the campaign, both for a 3-session Call of Cthulhu like little one-shot thing, and then for a like 20-some session campaign of Cyberpunk, which wasn't horrific in the slightest. Both campaigns were centered around the characters as all members of a police precinct, so not necessarily all working the same case or all being friendly with each other, but all there's this the conceit of interaction is that they are all police officers. The horror, the Call of Cthulhu one, the one shot, has the same. I used the same inciting incident and then the prep scenarios, don't prep solutions approach to. I drop some bombshell in, and that spurs a whole bunch of events that spiral out. And in the Call of Cthulhu one, it ended with a shootout with an MK Ultra cult, and it was a good time. And how I think the big thing is the way that you make it, and the reason I defend the one shot as like being like the same tools and the same kind of not the same experience, but of the same kind. Like it's still an RPG. It's not a board game. Is the presence of player agency and player like genuine player agency, which is to say, it's not a railroad. It doesn't have invisible walls up that can keep the players from going into certain
Which I think
spaces.
most published adventures would fall into that category.
Published adventures do that, which is why they're terrible. Which is why I don't use them. With very few exceptions. Buy the shucked oyster now. There is the total character agency. There is the absence of invisible walls or assumed outcomes. Like, okay, let's all like decide that we're gonna go along with this thing for the benefit of the one shot. That isn't there in the same way that it isn't there for an ongoing campaign. And I think a big thing, I've heard the word pre-gen get thrown around a lot here, and I really think that that's one of the big things that makes one shots feel underwhelming is a pre-gen. Which is that every time I've done a one shot, I've always picked a system where we can whip up a character within like 5 to 10 minutes at most, as a whole table altogether, because in that time, in that process, the players, it's like receiving a pre-gen and being like, okay, this is the guy I'm playing. Like that really does board gamify the experience, because it removes when a person makes a player character, as they roll the dice and they look at the stats, their brain is making all these little connections of, oh, he's got high strength and low dexterity. What's up with that? And especially if it's a skill-based system, then it's like, oh, I've got these skills, and they invest themselves into the character through the process of character creation. And so even if they only have that character for a few sessions, it gives that little hook that you need to make them care about the characters and make them think about the characters and think about and like form objectives for the characters.
And because you want horror, if you want them to be scared, you want them to buy in, it's easier for you to roll that up and feel something from the get-go than for me to hand you Professor Plum and for you to try and imprint.
Yeah. Which is why, like, we play a lot of, like, from a board game perspective, we play Betrayal at House on the Hill, another haunted house board game. And in that, like, it even has little character sheets with ability scores, but it really is not the same thing as thinking in character. And like, I don't know how people at this panel feel about the word, but like immersing yourself in the headspace of the character and acting accordingly is just
we're here,
not the same.
Engaged, not immersed.
Yeah, sure, whatever. It's just it's not the same as following the procedures of a board game. It really is still an RPG.
Yeah, and you hit on something a little bit earlier. I want to go back to pre-gens. This is something we haven't talked about for one shots. A lot of times you're handed out characters and you don't make your own. I'm gonna just come out and say I completely disagree with this practice, because I think you learn the rules of the game while you're making your character. I think that's a very important introduction to the rules, and I have an easier time and I am more immersed if I make my character, because that way I understand how the system works and I understand how the character sheet works. I know where everything is on my character sheet. And it helps me get into the character. And that's why I think systems that have very quick character gen, so like something like BX or Shadow Dark for a newer one, something like that. I think they make like the best one shots because you don't have to learn like a whole rule set for it. I mean, because they're just very simple.
Hmm. Well,
But I
DCC
don't know where you
funnels
guys stand
too,
on.
right? Because
Yeah,
you start off, you
I
don't have
yeah
like a level 0 guy doesn't have a whole lot to him, and
yeah.
you're gonna start off already vulnerable. So I think they have some really good ones. Like there's one where everybody just wakes up shackled below decks on a ship, and there's like a bunch of eggs that have hatched, and there's like a monster on the ship with you. That sounds amazing.
Oh, that's so
That,
fun.
that's actually that's interesting because like our you missed it, or I don't know, before you joined in, Dunderboos, I mentioned that to Harmony I would never run a dungeon crawl as a one shot. I think it's like it is the last thing I would ever use as a one shot, and a big
Oh,
part of it
totally.
is because like I've done some DCC funnels, and that is like, again, it feels like a different activity. It feels board gamey,
Hmm.
because especially when you have like the dungeon procedures of
Like the
turns and
sailors on the Starless Sea.
yeah, like they uh a dungeon crawl with high lethality that's assumed to just be, we're gonna just do this and it's not gonna go anywhere. That totally pulls, but even from the GM, and even worse as a player, completely pulls me into the headspace of I'm moving my little token around on the chessboard and oh, he's only got 6 hit points left, and I'm not even kind of thinking about role playing in any meaningful sense. It's all just about the
Hmm.
procedures and the dice and the tactics.
I want to
But
hear from Greg on this. I want to hear like what when you wrote a Halloween horror one shot, like what was your inspiration? Did you read any other adventures to prepare for it? What was your headspace for like how to make this different than a regular just straight up adventure?
That was my co-author's idea, and he was like, uh, we were getting into 70s exploitation movies at the time and watching a lot of like 60s and 70s like devil movies and witchcraft,
Okay.
occult stuff. And he
Monos, the
was
Hand
like,
of Fate.
well, maybe not that far, but yeah, Witchfinder General and stuff like that. Blood on Satan's Claw.
that's the
And he
best
was
one.
like, I want to make a Wicker Man adventure, and the players get captured and they get burnt in the Wicker Man. I'm like, you realize that that's not, most players are not really going to do that. Like having players like forcefully be captured and have this thing happen is
You don't think it would be fun to
impossible.
roleplay Nick Cage screaming "Not the bees"?
Yeah. So we did ended up making it like that, but we added some concessions for, what the players might want to do. But ultimately, the design mindset is like a lot of the adventures I write. It is linear. You go in as characters that are not pre-generated, but you roll your own characters, but the characters are expected to do something on a mission that's being handed down to them by a constable, or something like that. So that's how to get them engaged with the facility of the adventure. So we went with a lot of Call of Cthulhu style long text descriptions to try and like um, evoke some of the horror elements there.
Hmm.
And I don't know. That's basically how we did it. Just a linear type of adventure.
I have a question that's sort of come up from a lot of comments in the active chat, and sort of related to the idea of using the same toolbox just to produce different outcomes. How do you folks, one, have you folks done campaigns that had a different general theme that you have injected? Current subject is horror, right? The current topic of discussion, I guess, is horror into a campaign. And if so, did that like change the whole of the campaign to be being focused on horror? Or is that like a temporary thing? And how did you make it successful if you did?
Hmm.
Yeah, the very first campaign I ever ran was we ran like it for a little over a year, doing fifth ed, back in 2015, and the third or fourth session, I had just gotten the monster manual, and I will say that that the fifth ed monster manual did a really great job of getting me excited to run sessions, because you just flip through and you see these monsters and you just want to inflict them on the player. Like not all of it is great, but there were certain entries that just like really grabbed me. and there was one monster, I don't remember exactly, it was like a tree that had like it was like a vampire tree, or like a tree where somebody, like a vampire had turned into a tree or
Gulthias
something.
tree.
Blight.
Oh,
A
yeah.
blight.
I read that and I thought, oh, that is the sickest thing ever. And so I put an abandoned village just outside of my main town, where everybody had died of a disease and it was cursed by these vampire trees, these blights. And and so the players went to investigate. They wanted to check it out, and I really hammed it up. I like put some ominous music on. I had the lights dimmed, and I built up a bunch of tension. We managed to spook the characters sufficiently, and
Look at that thing.
nice,
Very good.
nice. The one thing that I did notice that happened after that point though, even though we went back to the regular campaign and the tone shifted back towards generic like heroic fantasy, it shifted the tone permanently, which is that once you know that something like really really like horrible and awful is present in the world, it leaves the door open for it horrible stuff to happen again. And so spooky horrible sessions happened again, and they started happening more frequently as the campaign went on. The tone got darker and darker, because the implication of one horror existing is the implication of other horrors, and
Yeah.
they might be connected to each other, they bleed into each other. And so the more you introduce a genre or a aesthetic trapping into your setting, the more it will want to manifest itself again and again and again with increased frequency. And this was actually why saw somebody mention the way back in the chat that horror is difficult to run campaigns for because maintaining tension all the time is difficult. But it's also, it can make we found that it could make the campaign unpleasant. Well, we ran just a straight horror campaign, like horror right out the gate, and intended to be, it was a Call of Cthulhu. I run all the way. After about session 12, my a couple of my players came to me and they're like, "Hey man, can we wrap this up soon?" It's like I'm having fun, but it's starting to get to me. Like it's starting to like
Wow. Yeah.
it's like the too much bleak and too much misery can start to wear you down, and you wanna enjoy you wanna goof off a little, you wanna lighten up. And so I think that while yes, you can absolutely like slide into another genre or another aesthetic in an ongoing campaign, just as a treat, dip your toes. You have to be aware that every time you do that, it will naturally want to happen again.
When you stare into
and
the abyss.
this applies to everything. Like if you do a little bit of Gonzo, it's very easy to suddenly find yourself in a very silly
Muppet Atlantis.
campaign. Yeah, things will get if you, and so I think this is where with the Traveler games, Jeffro being a bit militant about milieu and tone,
Yeah.
is probably worth it if you want to for a sustained campaign. If you want the tone to be consistent, and if you want the game to not transform into something else, you have to be conscious about what ideas are introduced and what elements are allowed to have ripple effects through the rest of the campaign world.
From
Right.
what you're saying, it seems to me like a longer campaign is almost better for horror, because one of the things about a one shot is that you don't have those breaths between. Often with a really scary thing, it's like you don't get the big monster right off the bat. Like you get evidence of it. You see what it did. You see, scratches on the doorpost, or you find a skull somewhere hanging high up in a tree. How did it get there? Right. And like, there's these moments where it's like the slow build up as you get more and more evidence of the thing until it's so large and so there that you have to deal with it. And like, from what you're describing, that sounds like that kind of
No,
slow
I'd actually
pulling you into the darkness, whereas in a one shot you don't really have the space between those to really give them that psychological hook.
I would disagree. Actually, I would say that the uh, uh,
I thought Canadians were supposed to be so agreeable. Gelatinous
is
Rube and
it
I
hedonic adaptation?
done nothing but this. I'm just kidding.
I came in and I'm the only one who likes running the game this way. So it's like the I think the distinction between the one shot and the campaign for horror, the reason I prefer the one shot for horror is the same reason that I think that The Exorcist is scarier than American Horror Story. I think like as soon as if you protract it over too long of a period of time, it becomes banal or it starts to feel contrived and you have to shoehorn in a bunch of stuff or there's a lot of useless filler that no one cares about. I think horror is better suited to movies than it is to television in the same way that horror is better suited to one shots than it is to long ongoing campaigns. Is you have just enough time to build the tension and get the players to care about the characters, and then you have it pop off in some spectacular fashion, and then resolve to either lingering dread or some kind of tenebrous stability. But then you walk away from it. It's like it's the same way that people make fun of like all the sequels, like all the Friday the 13th sequels. It's like the sequel. It's never an improvement to revisit the same or to drag out the same terror over too long of a period of time.
What about the
because
concept of the hero becoming the monster, like either through lycanthropy or a rot grub or something that you tell
Play
one
vampire.
player,
oh god,
nobody
Brian.
else knows this, but you've
So
been cursed. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Harmony.
you guys realize we're like ruining the topic for next month, right? No, seriously,
Next month is
we just
October.
ruined next
We are
month's show.
priming it. I think.
We're just priming the pump.
Okay,
This is the
okay.
first evidence of the monster.
Here's the
yeah,
thing:
no.
if you get to
Um,
if you get to establish this groundwork, then people are familiar with like the really basic stuff, and then you could jump into
No.
like, all right, this is how I really got them.
What
Mhm.
else is good for one shots besides horror? Then
Comedy. Ironically,
Oh, really?
yeah.
like
besides the same coin, my friend.
this is where everyone is John, which I feel like to explain comedy, it's best to give like everyone a working understanding of everyone is John. The game works on a very
Explaining
simple.
comedy makes it really funny.
Yeah, I know. It's very simple pass fail system. But the big thing is that each player has a finite amount of a currency called willpower, because they're all playing voices in this guy's head, and they all have objectives that are secret and hidden from the other players. So I might be the voice in John's head named Dave, and my objective is to steal a police car. And the and then like Dundermoose is playing the voice in John's head named Dundermoose, and his objective is to get on a podcast.
That's right.
And so you have this anytime John fails a skill check, and the skills are pertinent to each voice. Each voice has their own set of like 2 or 3 skills that they're good at. And anytime you fail a skill check, you impose a opportunity for another voice to take the steering wheel and be driving John. And so you're always and there's only ever one player driving him at a time, but the steering wheel is passed off, and you bid this currency. And so it's very goofy. It's inherently very goofy because you have, to be very frank, playing multiple personality disorder straight sounds kind of depressing and a little unpleasant. But playing it like in this very goofy tone,
Me, myself, and Irene.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I like that
It
idea.
works. It totally works
it.
for a one shot just because it doesn't overstay its welcome. Like everyone loves 20 minutes of Bugs Bunny, but 17 consecutive hours of Bugs Bunny that it starts to lose its luster.
I can think
you're
of
totally
plenty
right.
of
Go ahead.
scenarios for D&D that would be perfect for any kind of bro SR one shot that are not horror or comedy, such as prom night, cooking or dancing contest, running a coffee shop for a night. All these are great.
The next Bro SR
well-
one shot. Greg's running
Prom,
it. Be
yes.
there.
I don't know.
I don't know about the
I was
prom
going
one.
to
You
say
guys,
that I was here before anybody else looking at Strixhaven, that 5e supplement, and I said, guys, hear me out. You could.
I saw that. I remember when you said that. I still think you're wrong. But that's okay. You can
Wonderful book.
prove me
It's
wrong
the best
by
book
running
they've
it.
made besides
Well,
Tasha's.
I do like the session Bronstein because it is something that can happen in one night. If we're only limiting one shots to be like something that you could do once and be done with it by the end of the night. I had an idea while I was riding back, and this sounds crazy and stupid. I don't know if anybody would want to try it, but like, what if you did it? Like, because we've been using these session Bronsteins for all the games, like even the ones that don't support it, and it still seems to work somehow. Like Star Wars D6, you know, and Amber Diceless, and like all this stuff. I was like, how basic can you get and still have it work? Could we do a chess Bronstein where like we've got you're either aligned black or you're aligned white pieces, and then we've got like the king and the queen, and then 2 bishops, 2 knights, and like
You're off the reservation, man.
everybody submits their move at once, right?
It's
And there's like channels for black, channels for white, and then there's channels for knights. So like you can cross party lines and go talk to their knights and be like, "What are you guys trying to do?" and stuff, right? And
I retract my earlier concession. We're back to one shots just being an RPG variant of war games.
Yeah. See, this is
I
no,
was correct when I started.
I reject this Dunder Moose
because you could
proposal.
backstab your own side, and if you both go for the same square, then you have to decide: are you gonna back off, or is he? Are you gonna fight it out? And then you could have like friendly.
I think
fire.
at this point, it might be fun, but it's not a role playing game. You stepped out of bounds.
Wait. Okay, because we're getting into the realm of anarchy chess at this point.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know much about
I
anarchy chess, but okay, you should look up anarchy chess because it's like 1,000 people playing chess that can submit any move, legal or not, and you end up with like 2 knights go on a date, and like white
Did you ever
buys a
play
hotel on
Archon?
E6. No.
It was a computer game. It was like chess, but like you just because you took the spot didn't mean that you were going to get it. Like you moved in, and then there was like a little 2D platformer fight where like the queen would be like a wyvern, and if you were just like a pawn, you could run around and try to stab, but she could fly around and shoot fire. So like it was not a fair fight, but you still had a chance to win if you were good enough at the game. I don't know. I just thought it occurred to me while I was driving. I thought I'd throw it out there.
I do
There's
think
something you could
bringing
do
up
as a one shot. You could be doing a war game that's related to your campaign.
But if each piece was a person,
No.
The session Bronstein
done,
is
Harmony. They said it couldn't be done.
You're gonna do it now. Maybe this will be finally Dunder Moose running a
So-
Bronstein, but
I'm gonna tell
But-
you. I want to tell you why I think this won't work. Actually, because a central rule to chess is that both sides are trying to win. Every white piece is trying to secure a white victory. Every black piece is trying to secure a black victory. That is a
Alignment
central
matters.
tenet to chess, which means that you are completely breaking down everything and nothing matters anymore the second a white bishop decides that he wants a black victory. I'm sorry.
no. The problem, the lines are too clearly defined there. But the Bronstein is worth bringing up as an example of like a one shot that is still a role playing game. I think of the Gangbusters Bronstein. If we never did another one of those, I wouldn't feel dissatisfied. I really felt like the night kind of we played for the night and it was a blast and it worked. It required a huge quantity of prep on the part of Fluid the Druid. He put in so much legwork to make that game possible. And we all had our roles like a month and a half, 2 months.
But by your definition of prep,
but just wait, just
read the rules, right?
No. He actually
history.
He actually prepped material. He prepped in particular like faction sheets, NPC motivations. But while I was playing that Bronstein, I was engaging the same way I do at the table when I'm playing D&D or any other RPG, which is that I was thinking in character. I was like largely trying to talk in character. I was behaving in character.
Yeah,
Um,
see?
and it worked really, really well at and I think there's something to the broadsheet as a way to have an asymmetric and conflict heavy one shot experience, because the DM doesn't have to think about a challenge that will be sufficient and exciting for a party of adventurers, because he can just let the party of adventurers throw hands with each other.
I should have said checkers, so it was red and black.
Yeah,
But I didn't want you guys to accuse me of wanting to do a board game.
well, but chess is
So
a
you
board
pick
game.
Chess? What are you?
Dunder,
I'm teasing.
They've
They've got roles. They've got you
We're
could be
gonna-
the
Related.
queen. You could be the
20
king.
years in the potash mines. You're in exile.
You could be a cleric. You could be a knight.
Listen, since we conceded that one shots now are board games. with
No, we have
53
not.
hands,
Absolutely
and
no,
it's been
sir.
well established. Are there any genres that work poorly with one shots and should not be attempted?
You
Apparently
think you're
dungeon
slick.
Open
You
it.
think you're slick.
I don't.
I just
There's
went
not much
bump
thinking that
into
goes
it.
into it. It's very natural.
Bump sets.
Okay, well,
Grow these vocal
Apparently, I'm
cords
not
this
allowed
morning.
to talk about checks on stream. Right.
But seriously, like, what would you like? Is
Anything that
there
doesn't
something you
work.
think would suck in a one shot? I would propose
Um,
mysteries, but I will talk about that later.
yeah, I would
no,
actually
I
also
think-
say mysteries.
Yeah. Oh man, I hate to jump on the bandwagon. Oh, but yeah, mysteries.
Except,
Because you have to be able to leave and come back to them when something else happens. You have to be able to not solve them.
yeah, I would say the mystery. Although earlier you did bring up the murder mystery party as like an example of
Yes,
something that works.
but that's different.
That's a closed matrix. It
because-
is not open the way that a traditional RPG is. It's not like you don't have
Yes.
total free agency the same way. I think the one thing with the mystery is like 2 to 3, maybe 5 sessions a mystery can work, but in a single night, I've tried doing. I tried doing a mystery where the players were trying to find and catch a chupacabra in 1970s El Paso, and to get them to make it work, there was so much contrivance and convenience that had to happen, because the players they
how?
don't. Well, because the thing is that one of the things that makes a mystery RPG exciting and fun is actually solving the mystery, which means that you don't railroad the players, you don't give them the answer if they struggle too long, and you definitely don't do what there's a modern school of mystery design, which is that the players come up with a solution, and if it's a good enough solution, you just tell them that it's correct. Which that makes me want to vomit. But the thing is that the satisfaction of a mystery game is figuring it out, in the same way that a good mystery movie or novel, the satisfaction is figuring it out. And to do that, just to be very frank, most of us are not brilliant auteur hyper genius detectives, and so you need to be able to walk away from it for 3-4 days and think it over. And like I've played in mystery games where I walk away, and then like 3 days after the session ends, I'm like, wait, it's come to me. Or you can, and like that whole process just takes time. It's
Mysteries
Bryn
require-
Brindlewood Bay. That's the in the chat there. That's the game I'm talking about, and it repulses me. It's a Powered
Roll
by the
to see if
Apocalypse
you're
derivative.
Roll to
Exactly.
see if your solution's correct.
Go back,
Yeah.
Night Danger. You said something about how to host a murder, not having agency.
It doesn't have the same degree of agency, which is to say that in an RPG, if there's a dead body, my character is trying to investigate who murdered this person, I can get in my car and I can drive down to the local city archives, and I can research next of kin. I can interrogate suspects.
So the locked room nature of it is what makes
the closed room nature is a contrivance that makes, like, those kinds of contrivances in RPGs suck. Like I've
Because
seen
I've had
people.
people like break out against those on me. Like I was in one. The last one I played, this is so long ago, is when I was in a young marrieds class. Where I'm still in the same Sunday school class. It's no longer the young marrieds. But anywho, um I was this rock and roll guy. I had like the pleather pants and I was just like rocking a mohawk and all of that. And the people playing the police, the wife of the policeman, she thought I knew more than I was telling her. I don't know why people don't trust me in these Bronstein situations, but she thought I knew more. And so she got me into a room by ourselves, and then she put her finger across my throat. And she's like, I just killed you. And I'm like, you can't kill me. She's like, I'm a cop. I can do what I want. You're dead. Because she knew one of the rules to the game was if someone dies, then they come back as a private investigator helping the cops. And she thought, if I kill him, then he'll tell me everything he knows. And it was so outside the box, I wasn't ready for it. And I thought, what an amazing play. That gal had some agency. She was very disappointed to learn that she became a crooked cop for nothing, that I had told her everything. I'm just not a very convincing human.
Oh man. Well, I think the closed box nature of those, as I was digging into mystery design, and mystery RPGs,
Yeah, you looked into this.
I'm still mulling a lot of stuff over. I will return to writing about it. One common thing I saw was like, especially if you're running in like a fantasy RPG, is like figure out a reason for why their spells don't help them, like speak to dead, or and like try and do a locked room mystery, like where they're isolated, and all of that I think is just atrocious because all you're doing is removing the things that make RPGs fun, which is the open-ended nature of I can do anything. And as soon
The
as
mists
you're
of Barovia close around you.
as soon as you're
And if you
inventing
try to
all of
get
these
through them, you
made
come
up
right back out.
as soon as you're inventing all these made up nonsense reasons why I can't do the things I can normally do in an RPG to support the vehicle of the mystery, the experience sucks more and
Okay.
rules less. And we should always be trying to make things that rule and not make things that suck.
Rube, have we hit all the elements that made you choose mystery as a can't be done for one shots, or is there more to it?
Yeah, I think so. I'm tempted to. Well, before I jump in, I do want to ask if anybody has a different genre that they think works poorly in a. Yeah, I'm going to ask if anybody has a different genre that they think works poorly inside of an RPG, or specifically for one shots. And because I do have a spiel that's built up that I wasn't anticipating. I thought it might
hold
go
on,
here.
hold on to it for just a second. Aries needs to jump out. Just want to say goodnight. Have a good one, Aries. Any last words for the audience?
No, thanks for having me on. I'll watch out for my game. Maybe
When does the Kickstarter go live?
A couple weeks, 2 weeks from now.
Okay.
I'll see if we can get a sign up link and somewhere people can get notified. But yep.
Nice.
I'll try to run a one shot in my Lancer game. I did request more kaijus.
I will step
Thank
through
you.
the screen and strangle you to death. All right, I'll talk to you later.
I hope you don't have a beard. The last person who threatened that was pirates. Pirates don't really work well in one shots. That doesn't.
Thank you so much for joining us,
There'd be
Greg.
something sticking
Nice
in white
hanging,
to my
dude.
beard.
Bye bye.
All right.
Whitebeard.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rube.
There's nothing pureed coconut. No, I think somebody said the dangerous. It's not a good idea.
No, I'm
Somebody
sorry.
said heists in the chat. What do you guys think of that?
Yes and no. The depends on how you're running the heist. I've run heists using like I have this environment and the players are going to try and come up with a plan and they're going to make a bunch of skill checks and try and act on it. And that generally I don't think is well suited to a one shot just because of how much time is spent preparing for the one shot. Like how much time the players spend like planning their heist and like looking over the map of the you could do it maybe if you had the players make their characters, you gave them the job, like you told them what the heist was, you gave them their information, and then you said, all right, in 3 months I'm going to run this one shot, and you guys, when you show up to my house and sit down at my table, you better have a plan, and we're just going to drop right into it. And they have that time to plan ahead. I've had players do schemes like that for me before. They made a letter with like a wax seal that they're like, here, like they revealed their plan to me halfway through a session. That sort of stuff can work, but I feel like you're getting out of the realm of the one shot, just because it's like, if you have like 3 months planning ahead, then is it really a one shot at that point, or are you just role playing a thief planning a heist for 3 months before actually role playing the thief performing the heist? The other way that heists generally get executed is, of course, the too much pre planning makes it no longer a one shot, because especially if the players are doing it. And then there's the Blades in the Dark school, which is that the players get a rough idea of how they're going to approach the problem, and then the game has a flashback mechanic where you can stress your character out to have something. It's like, well, actually, I had planned to have this here ahead of time, like a weapon planted inside the building. And I've come to really dislike that, A, because I don't like meta currencies, and B, it makes resource management trivial. It makes like there's something very fun about coming up with a plan and then executing it, as opposed to just rolling dice to see if your character had a good plan. Which is why I would class like Blades in the Dark and most Powered by the Apocalypse story games as closer to a board game than a role playing game, because you're just rolling dice to see if the character that you're controlling came up with a good idea, as opposed to you coming up with a good idea. So yeah, I don't think Heist would work. I don't think
Heists are difficult just because you're right that it takes it takes a little while, because players have to stake out the target. They have to learn information, and they deliberate a lot, like who's going to do what, how they're going to carry it out. So you do need kind of the downtime in between, because of course it takes place over several days. They work so much better for ongoing campaigns, I think.
I think in a conventional RPG structure, a political intrigue game wouldn't work super well, but in a Braunstein asymmetric double-blind fog of war situation, political intrigue would work very well. So it's like, it also depends. Are you running a one GM with a mutually aligned get along gang of players, or are you running a GM with a whole bunch of double crossing, secret scheme having players? Like I guess it how you're actually executing the session will determine what will or won't work. Like I probably wouldn't do a horror Braunstein, because
Interesting combination of words.
I wouldn't do a horror Braunstein just because I think that the eliciting of horror requires a really finely tuned and careful attention to detail and a reading of the room. Braunsteins, by their nature, are very social, and people breaking off to talk to each other and stuff. And so basically, anytime you start to feel too spooked or too like things are starting to get too tense, it's like, hey, player A, can I talk to you over in the other room for a second? And so you get people like, there's a certain amount of out of character kibitzing and socializing that happens at a Braunstein that I think doesn't lend itself to the environmental tension that makes horror fun to participate in. Like, imagine if in a haunted
Unless
house,
those people start dying.
Yeah,
or starting getting cut off from the rest of the group.
Yeah, imagine if in a haunted house, every couple rooms, you could just like step outside and like have a cigarette and talk to your buddy, and then like come back in. Like it would completely.
What if your buddy was like
undermine
one of those chat roulette guys with the special effects that while you're in the middle of talking to him, his jaw drops down to here and his eyes go all dark? And
okay.
I'm just kidding.
No, yeah. I think that if the ability and the kind of assumed assumption that you're going to be pulled out of the experience periodically makes a Braunstein a poor fit for horror.
Cal says stabbings all around.
I want to try it now, because I mean, I think a horror Braunstein looks a lot like a mafia game. or
Yeah.
or,
Or
or
well, like you could do.
werewolf or something.
Yeah, you could do like vampire, like the Black Lodge guys are always talking about uh always talking about like vampire, and it is a horror game, but it's a different type of horror. It's kind of what they always use the term personal horror. And I think that's a different execution. I probably wouldn't do it as a one shot. I think it probably works better as a campaign. I think they probably would agree with that. Yeah, he's writing furiously. He's got like a notepad or something in front of him.
Oh yeah, no, I always take notes while I'm like on these streams. I have
Oh
my-
yeah,
my tablet.
Oh wow.
I keep a big stack of index cards on my desk because you just never know when like an idea will come to you.
Especially on streams like this. It's delightful.
Well, Rube said something while I was still in the car earlier on in the night, and you said one-page games, but I was thinking like one-page dungeons. Or have you guys seen the one-page trifold game adventures in Mothership?
Yeah, a couple of those. Some of them are really
So
really quite
I
slick.
got the first one, the Haunting of Ipsilon 14, and that was, I mean, it's pretty much Alien, like on a mining colony on an asteroid, and it was really fun. My problem is the guys that I play with, they will turn it all into a 2-shot or a 3-shot if you let them, because they just
they want
really
to keep
get
going.
into it and they take their time. And so, like, how important is it that you be able, this is an earlier question from the chat, that you be able to finish the 1-shot in one session?
I class a one shot as 1 to 3 sessions. After that, you're starting to get into something that should probably turn into a campaign. Like you should give it more time to breathe, because sometimes things just like, especially like circumstances come up, you just can't wrap things up in a single night. But
if you're
I'll say
having
those-
people over to pass out candy on Halloween night, and you're going to be playing between the trick or treaters showing up,
the trifold Mothership adventures are interesting because there's actually very little detail in a lot of them, where it's really in a lot of ways it's my school of adventure design, which is that I just give you a set of circumstances and maybe a couple timers or clocks, and you just drop the players in and just let them react to the situation. Like, again, provide situations, do not provide solutions. And they paint in a broad brush, and I'll admit I'm a total sucker for the aesthetic quality of all the Mothership stuff. I find it very excellent. And I had a lot of fun running it. We did it for a little while.
All right.
Yeah, that's a
So
good book. That's a sick
Ooh.
book.
Yeah,
I got
played a
this for
little bit of
Rube.
that. I didn't.
because he needed me to
Where's-
roll up a space station for the Lancer Steam. And I
Yeah.
was like, I don't want to roll up a space station. What
Which was
traveler
like,
book
well,
is that in?
but you offered, and I thought that there was some Traveler supplement because I rolled
did
up
too.
all the planets using Traveler for
Yeah.
that. So I thought you were going to use like a Traveler supplement that I
I
missed.
quickly Googled and I couldn't find anything. And so I knew there was one for Mothership in this book. So I was like, sweet.
Oh, you got a bunch of the other players to do so as well, which was nice. I think that's so interesting that so the issue that you brought up for one shots is them potentially going too long.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I think makes one shots go poorly is game types where they end too soon, like mysteries. Mysteries have the chance to they do have the chance to like go way over long and just have no gameplay. But a lot of in an RPG, I think that you have a chance of. I really think that you have a chance of just how would you put this? You have a chance to just guess that whatever the secret or the clue to the mystery is, and solve it right there, and then that's the end of the game. That's the end of the one shot. So I was thinking,
Everybody go home.
what happened? Oh, like in the middle of a
Yeah,
you're in
you
the
said
middle of the
that's
game,
end
and-
of the game. So you are all no longer welcome. Leave.
yeah. Well, you can still hang out, obviously, but like the game at that point, it's like, all right, well, he guessed that this guy's the murderer, so it's probably going to go pretty quickly from here. I guess that's the end of the one shot. And I was thinking, like, that can't be an RPG. Because in an RPG, your success at a goal, like you never only have one goal in an RPG. You have a multitude of goals, and succeeding at those individual goals is supposed to carry you on this success curve upward that I discussed once, I think, with Ryan Howard of Rolling Bones, right?
Yeah.
You have this like logistical curve. There's a curve at the top where you start succeeding, and then sometimes you have some setbacks and stuff like that that diminish your ability to achieve more goals later on. But generally speaking, you are succeeding at goals, eventually hitting almost 100% success mark. It's just you can't succeed at all your goals. Exactly. You can't get all of them at once, right? I have the castle I wanted now, but now I have to figure out how to make one great army work against two great armies. And now this is, whereas for like something like a board game is perfectly happy setting you up with one goal that everybody is supposed to target, and the game, obviously RPGs respond to players as well, but I think specifically board games have a meta knowledge that you're not just playing, they have meta knowledge when you are getting close to your goal. And so a board game's response curve is a bit more like delaying the most successful person so that the other players, not necessarily that, but the other participants, will say, can catch up. And so if you got a game
blue
that
shell
like
in Mario Kart, right?
Yes, a rubber band. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if you have a game that ends when the goal is succeeded, and because of that, certain genres make it actually for a poorer. Certain genres make for a poorer one shot because we know that the game is going to end when this goal is concluded. I think I go back to my declaration earlier that these one shots really are just more of board games. We're just playing them under an RPG pretense, and so it might actually be better to run these one shots not with an RPG under RPG pretense, but with a board game perhaps under an RPG pretense. With
this
the exception
misses
of
out on
checkers
the value. This misses out on the entire value of RPGs as vehicles of total player agency. Like running a one shot as a board game with just some RPG set dressing would feel cheap and shallow in a way that a good one shot does not, because RPGs have unique characteristics that are not replicated in board games, no matter how much you pretend to be your token on the board.
Here's what I'm saying is I don't get to enjoy those in a one shot. Right?
How do you mean?
Well, in the mystery example, if I get a lucky guess for whoever the mystery is, because I did some mystery RPG writing, if I get a lucky guess on who the bad guy is, then that's not the end of the show in an RPG campaign, right? If I'm Dexter Morgan in the show Dexter doesn't end when he catches one bad guy. It ends over there's usually one big bad guy that's present over a series or over an entire season. But in the meantime, he's catching individual bad guys and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So he's got the success curve that's sort of responding to him. And I get to enjoy that in a long form RPG campaign. I don't get to enjoy that in a one shot using RPG rules. But I do know that board games let me enjoy that success curve.
And this is why I do think that not all circumstances are suited to a one shot. I would agree. Obviously, like mysteries aren't. We've agreed mysteries are a bad fit. Heists are kind of a bad fit.
Right.
But there is something to be said. I think to have a good one shot, and my best one shots that I've enjoyed the most as either a player or a GM have always been ones where there is not a singular like final victory condition. There is not a, well, once we figure out who the killer is, because obviously like this is why mystery it doesn't work, or once I get through this dungeon, this is why dungeons are a bad fit. In a lot of ways, it's the most enjoyable way to experience it is kind of like a you have a set, you have an environment, you have a set of characters, and you have some kind of major event or thing that has thrown everything out of balance.
Pressure.
External. I think a time crunch works really well. On 4chan for a while, they were developing this setting called Night Shift over on TG, of a night shift gas station crew, and increasingly weird, horrible, supernatural stuff starts happening to these night shift workers at this gas station. And so I did one of the one shots I did was it was a horror kind of one shot. Is it's like we're just make your attendants make your characters, and then we're just gonna be doing a shift on the night shift. And so if you think about it like an episode of Dexter or an episode of a TV show or X-Files, actually X-Files is an even better fit. It's a good one shot could be the start of a campaign, but it doesn't have to be. I can watch one episode of X-Files and then just carry on. I don't need to see the to continue participating. It can be
All right.
I think that's it. Is that a good one shot can become a campaign, but it doesn't need to be. You can walk away from it happy with just that's enough.
Yeah. And to your point, I think that the horror version, your description of horror one shots earlier actually matched up with that perfectly.
Yeah, I think horror really is the best fit for this type of gameplay, more than dungeon crawls, more than really anything. Horror is just really lends itself well.
All right. And gosh, we've been going like a long time, guys. We've been here for
you got me
2.5
worked
hours.
up, man.
I know it's been an exhilarating show. Like it kind of started off a little bit slow, and then it kind of ramped up, and then Dundermoose came in, and all hell broke loose, and now we have rock paper scissors.
He brought the
scene
beacon.
in the
He lit.
He
lit the beacon.
So
Night
all
Danger
right,
can't even
but-
sleep with the aurora borealis just lighting up his night sky.
really,
I don't know.
No, I was saying when I
okay.
said lighting up the beacon, I was referring to your incredible chrome dome.
Talking about my nut. You don't know before you shave your head whether it's going to be shaped like a sack of doorknobs or not.
Every man should shave his head bald every couple years just to see if his head has started looking weird yet.
Zombie.
I got plenty of scar tissue on my scalp. I already know that it looks weird, and frankly, this took a little bit too long to.
Yeah, you can't just discuss that.
Yeah, no.
Almost down to my ass now. I'm not getting rid.
I do want to start to wrap up. So closing statements. We'll go around. Everyone, go ahead and give a closing statement and remind us where we can find you, what your channel is, what you do. If you want to go ahead and start, Night Danger.
My closing statements is that any statement that Rube is about to make where he says that I am wrong and he's right is obviously
do you want to go after Rube?
It's wrong, it's obviously incorrect, and that
You could go after. You could just go after me and say that everything that guy
no,
said.
I've already preambled it. I've already preambled
Ladies
that I'm
and gentlemen
right.
of the jury,
and you're
Rube
wrong.
will try to say.
Because I could start off by everybody who goes after me is gay
Yeah.
and
yeah.
wrong.
So, but I would
Which is
say
my original
obviously,
plan, but Harmony
you should-
sabotaged me.
you should everyone
There's
should
nothing wrong with that.
In the old-fashioned sense of the word.
everyone should
They're happy enemies.
everyone should run either insert it into your campaign or run a one shot. Do something spooky and fun this October because it's always worth it. It's always a good time. And I can be found at Twitter on with Night Danger, and on YouTube at Night Danger RPG, and also nightdangerrpg.blogspot.com, where you can read session reports of my players' endless misery.
And Rube, if you want to go next.
He's gone.
You
silent.
were muted. All right, you're muted, Rube. All
None
right,
numbers goes
Dundermoose.
after me. That's my.
All right.
Oh, I'm going next? Okay. So we've covered a lot of ground. I don't want you to look at where you are and see what we've said as a thou shalt. We are passionate about this. We got different views, obviously. Clearly, we differ on certain things. But you're going to have players where you are, and you're going to have your own level of confidence of what you feel like you can run and stuff. The story with Willow and Jason, I don't want you to think that you have to be an S tier 5e style over prepping novelist DM in order to be able to do this. Read the manual, as my friend Crafty Matt would say. Like, let your prep be learning the game so that if people come and they haven't, that you can cover for them. And then whether it's 5e or you're playing 1E, or you're full on the Bronstein train, see if there's something you can do for a night with your friends that they might get a kick out of. And all you can do is all you can do, and all you can do is enough. And if they enjoy it, keep it up. And if not, change something up. But don't be like Willow and sell all your books and get out. The problem with Willow is she bought into one way. For all the people that say, there's no true one way. Most of the people that say that are conventional 5e gamers, and they're going to eventually sell all their books and give up because it eats DMs and it wears you out. Do stuff that's fun. Break the rules, but learn them as you go. And don't beat yourself up too much, and just make sure your people are having fun. And that's what I got.
All right. Rube, did you have anything? Rube, you're quiet again.
Yeah, I did again. I'm going to say, if you're going to run a one-shot, this is why I never mute myself using StreamYard, because then I forget if I have the off button on here. If you're going to run a one-shot, do so as a means of auditioning the players, potentially auditioning the GM, within the confines of as if you were interviewing sort of anybody that you would like to start a hobby with, right? Use it as an opportunity to start a hobby with somebody else. I'm going to go bowling with my buddy here, and then we're going to figure out if we want to do a bowling league. Or I'm going to go hunting with my friend here, and then we'll decide if we want to organize a really big duck hunt. Use RPGs or use a one-shot in that fashion as a prelude or a useful interruption to an otherwise ongoing pro-social activity. I think that anything that's done socially among people needs time and repeated time to kind of get people to file down the rough edges and fit in nicely with one another, which doesn't really work for a single affair, right? But the one shot is low enough stakes that you can do it in that case, but just use it for the purpose of something bigger. Because why not? Oh, and you can find me at Gelatinous Rube on YouTube, at Rube Jelly on Twitter, or Ash of Creativity on Twitter. And I have a Discord that's popping off, and I believe it's linked in both of my Twitter accounts and my videos.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us today. I think we've had a variety of interesting viewpoints and some disagreement today, but I think at the end of the day, I agree with Dundermoose. We're trying and learning, and people experiment with this stuff, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But we've all kind of come to different conclusions as to how valuable the one shot is and how it can be used in a campaign. I think my perspective is it's a good as a small part of an ongoing campaign to introduce a new group, or like Rube said, to learn if you like a system or not. Or I believe that was Night Danger. Either one. Anyway, thanks guys for joining us today. We will be back near the end of next month, and I can't imagine that the topic is anything but something to do with Halloween. It's got to be. We haven't talked about it, but I'm declaring that it probably is. Anyway, thanks guys for joining us. We will see you next month.